The story begins as a young girl is left all alone after a group of goblins attack the carriage she was riding on. The goblins go to end her life as well, but a mysterious boy arrives to protect her. Years later, our protagonist named Lost is asked if he would like to join a girl's party, and everyone around is shocked to hear that the girl wants to team up with him. Lost is shocked himself, so the girl points out that his sign is clearly asking to recruit people to his party. This girl insists on joining him and declares that she is a martial artist. Lost introduces himself as sort of a healer, but an employee of the Adventurers Guild rushes to stop the girl from making the biggest mistake of her life. Her name is Amherst, and she warns the girl named Naru not to join Lost's party. Amherst reveals that this guy has been given the nickname the Incompetent Lost. He is a healer, but he only knows the beginner magic spell called Basic Heal. Lost is a labyrinth orphan, and just like the rest of the parentless children, he grew up as an adventurer. However, even after all these years, Lost can't even use an area heal or a high heal spell. He is known by all as an absolute failure of a human being. Despite all this, Lost managed to join a party called Lightning Sword, that is, until recently when he was kicked out for not being able to use detoxification magic. Everyone knows how incompetent he is, so no one ever invites him to join their parties. Amherst warns that Naru will never be able to make any money if she parties up with Lost, but Naru reveals that she already has plenty of money. Amherst panics when she sees how much cash Naru is just carrying around, and she explains that most of the adventurers in this town are gangsters. Everyone looks pretty menacing, so Amherst tells Naru to never show such large amounts of money. Naru graciously thanks her, and Amherst can tell that she is pretty new to this whole adventuring thing. Amherst offers to introduce Naru to a nice beginner's party, but the little grifter says that she will have to charge Naru for her services. Naru surprisingly rejects the scammer because she has been wanting to join Lost's party for a really long time. Lost and Naru go to sign some papers to make their party official, and Naru stares a hole right through Lost's skull. She admires him a lot for some reason, and she's relieved to finally meet him again. The little weirdo is startled when Lost asks her to sign her name, but she gathers herself. Lost pays the guild fee, and their party is now official. Outside, Lost explains that no one has ever explored the deepest part of the Mardat labyrinth. There are still many mysteries inside, and no one even knows who the final boss is. Many adventurers have dreams of finding vast riches inside, so they have gathered in Mardat City, making it one of the largest cities in the nation. Lost is a psychopath, as he wants to go to the labyrinth right this second, so Naru wonders if that's really okay since they just formed their party a couple of hours ago. Also, before leaving, Amherst told Lost that he could only take Naru to the grasslands because she is still a novice. The labyrinth leaks magic power to a few places around it, and it causes monsters to spawn there. The grasslands are one of these places, but only weak monsters spawn there. It's the best place for beginners, but it's too big and it's hard to find monsters. The labyrinth is the exact opposite, as it's filled with monsters, and that's exactly what Lost is looking for. He assures Naru that they won't have any problems as long as they don't go too deep inside, and he can handle things if they get bad. Lost is strangely confident for a healer, but he says it's nothing, and they continue on. When they arrive, Naru insists on taking the lead. She is a martial artist, so it's only right for Lost to back her up from behind as the healer. Lost is happy with her confidence, but he wonders if she can really fight. Naru quickly proves herself as she beats down a group of goblins, and Lost is thoroughly impressed. He explains that the guild buys the magic stones dropped by the monsters, and that's how most adventurers make their living. The stones are valuable because they can be used for many things, but Lost points out that she should know this already even as a beginner. Unfortunately, the magic stones of goblins aren't worth very much, so they will have to defeat more powerful monsters if they want to make the big bucks. The two agree to go deeper into the dungeon to earn more cash, and Naru is tasked with protecting the weak healer if anything happens. Moments later, it's Lost who ends up protecting Naru as he stops her from stepping on a trap. He shows her where her grave was just about to be and explains that he was able to save her because he noticed the different color tiles. Finding traps is usually a thief's job, so Naru wonders how Lost was able to do it as a healer. Lost simply explains that he has been an adventurer for a really long time, so he has picked up a couple of skills here and there. Deeper in the dungeon, the two spot an orc, but it shouldn't be at this level of the dungeon. Orcs are known as mid-level demons, and their robust bodies make them very difficult to beat. Their power is equal to monsters on the lower levels of the labyrinth, so they should never appear in the upper levels. Naru wonders if this is the time to run away, but Lost is confident that they can defeat it if they work together. Lost doesn't want to force her, but she surprisingly agrees, trusting his judgment. Naru starts off the fight, but is startled when her first attack makes her feel like she is kicking a brick wall. Luckily, the beast is pretty slow, but Naru still ends up taking some damage. The fight quickly goes bad for her as she is cornered, but the beast surprisingly isn't able to finish her off. Just then, Naru can only stare in amazement as she sees that Lost rescued her just in time by plunging his sword right into the orc's chest. Lost is glad to see that Naru is okay, but she can only wonder if Lost is really just a healer. Lost brushes the question off again and explains that his years of working as an adventurer have led to him learning a few close combat techniques. Naru says that his attack didn't seem like a simple technique, but Lost distracts her by pointing out that she is injured. Naru isn't too worried about it, but Lost is a healer through and through, so he knows that even the smallest wounds need proper treatment. Naru insists that she is okay, but Lost heals her anyway. The magic stone left by the orc is much bigger than the goblins and has way more magic power too. This means it will be worth a pretty penny. Lost explains that he has seen what he wanted to see from Naru in terms of her fighting ability. They have also earned a good amount of money, so they can head home now, but he leaves the decision to Naru. She says that she can still fight, so the two go on to do some more hunting. Afterwards, Amherst is amazed to see how many monsters they defeated in just one day. She realizes that Lost must have taken the newbie to the labyrinth, and what's worse is that them having an orc stone means that he took her to the middle level. But Naru corrects her by explaining that they only went to the upper level. The orc shouldn't have been there, but this matches up with what the other adventurers have been saying as well. The higher-ups have also been very busy recently, so Amherst thinks that something is happening in the labyrinth. Amherst's mood quickly changes as she is happy to pay them for their stones. Naru is weirded out by how excited Amherst is, so Lost explains that guild employees get a pay raise when they buy magic stones. This is only true when it's from the adventurers they are responsible for, which means that the more they make, the more Amherst makes. Lost is shocked by how much the payout is, and Amherst has to remind him to split it with Naru. Lost would never forget, but he is surprised because, even after splitting it, it's still 10 times more than he has ever earned. Lost goes into a deep depression when he realizes what this means. Amherst explains to Naru that Lost was just getting fooled when he was a member of the Lightning Sword Party, and they never gave him his fair share of the rewards. Naru is infuriated by this, so she demands that the guild do something. The decision is up to Lost, so he decides to just move on because he is happy with his new party, and he wants to forget about the old one. The pair leaves, but a mysterious man watches them. Later, the greedy Amherst happily counts all her earnings, but she is startled by the man Handsome, her boss. He just hopes that Amherst didn't help Lost find a new party. Amherst explains that she doesn't have the overpowered convincing ability that it would take to get someone to join Lost's party. Instead, there was just a girl who saw something special in Lost. Handsome seems to know who the blue-haired girl is, but it concerns him for some reason. That night, Lost is surprised to learn that word of him having a new party member has already spread around the city. The incompetent Lost is pretty well known, so him finding a fool to join his party is a big deal. Lost prepares to reserve a room, and Naru is startled by the thought of sharing a room with him. Lost decides that they should sleep in separate rooms, but this seems to disappoint Naru. The two head to their rooms for the night, and Naru thinks back to when she was healed. It turns out that Naru was the girl in the carriage, and Lost was the guy who rescued her. She was thankful after he healed her, but Lost apologized for not being able to do more. Naru was strangely positive, even though the goblins had ended the lives of everyone else who must have been in the carriage. She didn't seem to care and just vowed to become an adventurer. Naru wanted to join Lost's party one day, and she promised to protect him. Naru has been training very hard since then, and she has waited a long time to be with Lost. When she heard that Lost was kicked from his party, she immediately rushed to the city. The little stalker is pleased to see that her plan has worked perfectly. She formed a party with Lost, and they even defeated an orc. She is doing it all for him, so she becomes depressed when she thinks about how Lost didn't even recognize who she was. That's understandable since her appearance has changed so much, but that isn't all that has changed. Lost is much stronger than before, and he doesn't seem to need her protection. Naru snaps herself out of her depression and reminds herself that she promised to protect Lost no matter what. The re-motivated Naru prepares for bed. But one thing still doesn't make sense to her. She can't figure out why people would call Lost incompetent when he is actually really powerful. Back when Lost was still part of Lightning Blade, the party was facing a Hydra, and one of their members had already been injured. It was Lost's responsibility to heal her, while the party leader kept the Hydra at bay. Unfortunately, while Lost could heal the physical injury, the woman had also been poisoned. She asked if Lost could handle the poison, but he apologized, explaining that he couldn't cure it. This made her angry because it meant she would have to recover on her own. The leader told her to stop complaining and get back into the fight since he couldn't distract the Hydra forever. However, with the poison still affecting her, she wasn't in any condition to fight. The leader turned to Lost again, asking him to get her back into shape, but Lost replied that he couldn't and that they should have brought an antidote potion. The leader argued that he didn't buy one because antidotes are expensive, and it should have been Lost's job as a healer to manage that, since Lost and Saberia weren't providing much help. The leader turned to the mage, asking her to step in because he couldn't handle the Hydra alone. Armia attempted a flame spell, but it had no effect on the Hydra, which frightened her, and she ended up dropping her staff. Margulis, fed up with the party's incompetence, decided to call for a retreat. As soon as Margulis gave up, Armia broke down and fled, followed by Lost, who was helping Saberia, who still couldn't walk. However, as they retreated, the Hydra kept its eyes on Lost for some reason. When they returned to the guild, Margulis took great pleasure in informing Lost that he was being kicked out of the Lightning Blade party. He justified the decision by blaming Lost for their failure to defeat the Hydra. Although Lost didn't believe he was the only one at fault, especially since Margulis and Saberia had been so excited to fight a Hydra that they stayed up all night and went into the battle sleep deprived, the two of them refused to accept any responsibility. They turned to Armia to decide who was to blame. Armia didn't want to put all the blame on Lost, but since she had also performed poorly, she didn't want Margulis targeting her instead, so she chose to blame Lost. Lost later woke up from this dream, realizing he was still haunted by what had happened that day. Before Lost had joined Lightning Blade, he was already known around town as an idiot healer, though he still dreamed of becoming a top-tier adventurer. When a party finally offered him a position, Lost was thrilled and jumped at the chance. However, once they were in the labyrinth, Lost quickly realized they hadn't hired him as a healer. They needed a human sacrifice to distract the monsters. Lost was left behind, forced to run for his life, while his supposed party members ignored him. But then, unexpectedly, the monsters shifted their focus away from Lost and attacked the other party members instead, resulting in a massacre. Lost was the only one to survive. While he knew it was common for someone like him to be treated poorly, he still wished for someone to recognize him as a legitimate adventurer. As Lost was walking home, he stumbled upon a carriage that had been attacked by goblins. Normally, he wouldn't have risked helping, but the terrified expression on a little girl's face prompted him to act. Throwing caution aside, he ran to defend her, doing his best to fend off the goblins, despite being a poor fighter. However, within minutes, he was knocked out by a blow to the back of his head. Lost fully expected to die that day, but when he woke up, the little girl was standing over him. He was surprised to be alive until he saw that the knight's order had arrived and defeated the goblins. Lost had tried so hard to be heroic, but in the end, he felt like a complete fool. However, despite not doing much, the girl thanked him. His actions had bought enough time for the knight's order to arrive, and she thought it was really cool how he had jumped in to save her. Lost noticed a scratch on the girl's arm and healed it, but he didn't feel deserving of her gratitude, as healing was the only thing he was good at. When she looked confused, Lost told her about his weaknesses and how he had been tricked into going to the labyrinth to be used as bait. The girl felt bad for him and declared that she would become an adventurer in the future and form a party with him so she could protect him. Soon enough, the girl left with the knight's order, and by that point, Lost had pieced together that she was the daughter of a noble family. He never really believed that she would actually become an adventurer, or that he'd ever see her again. Nevertheless, her words gave him the courage to keep going, so he decided to continue striving to become a proper adventurer. He embarked on a journey and eventually found a mentor. Under their guidance, he began his training arc, working tirelessly for countless hours to improve himself. Although as a healer he could still only use basic healing spells, he developed many other valuable adventurer skills. Lost was confident that he would no longer be a burden to anyone. Upon returning to pursue his adventure dreams, the first party he joined was Lightning Blade, but we all know how that turned out. Still, Lost remains grateful to that girl. If she hadn't spoken those kind words to him that day, he likely would have quit being an adventurer altogether, but of course, he doesn't think he will ever have the chance to meet her again. And there's no way she would have actually become an adventurer like she promised. Just then, Narcina knocks on his door, so Lost answers, and she suggests they go get some breakfast together, to which he happily agrees. After breakfast, they head back into the labyrinth, aiming for the lower floors this time. As they enter, Narcina notices an inscription on the ground, and it appears to be a teleportation circle, though she's never seen one in person before. Lost explains that teleportation circles aren't found in every labyrinth, and this one was probably installed by magicians shortly after the labyrinth was discovered, though he doesn't know much more about it. Narcina asks if they can use the circle to teleport to other locations, which is technically true, but there still has to be a teleportation circle at the destination to exit from. Narcina remarks how convenient that would be and wishes there were a teleportation circle in the city so they wouldn't have to walk all the way out here. However, the knowledge needed to create these circles was lost hundreds of years ago, so making new ones isn't possible. They both step onto the teleportation circle, and after a bright flash, they find themselves on one of the lower floors. Lost informs Narcina that they've reached a mid-level floor, where the monsters will be much stronger than the goblins they fought yesterday, and advises her to be extra careful as they make their way through the floor. Narcina goes off on her own and tries to punch a lich. Lost quickly warns her that liches are made of pure spirit energy, so physical attacks won't work. He suggests they retreat since they don't have anything that can harm the lich, but Narcina reveals she has a trick up her sleeve that might work. Trusting her, Lost acts as bait, running ahead while the lich chases him. As he passes Narcina, she readies herself to strike. Every person possesses a form of spirit energy known as prana, and as a martial artist, Narcina has trained enough to control the prana within her body, using it as a weapon. She covers her fists with prana and, with a powerful punch, she creates a hole through the lich, which soon disintegrates like any other monster, leaving behind its magic stone. Lost rushes over to check on her, and aside from a small wound on her arm, she's perfectly fine. He tells her to stay still for a moment, pulls out a magic item that enhances healing spells, and uses it to heal her injury. Afterward, they head back to the guild to show Amherst the magic stones they collected. Amherst is shocked they managed to defeat a lich, but she's also excited for the commission she'll get from selling the stones. Lost and Narcina earn more money than they expected, leaving them both in a great mood as they head back to the inn. Along the way, they come across a street fight, something that has become increasingly common as more outlaws move into town to become adventurers, tarnishing the reputation of the honest ones. Lost remarks that there's nothing they can do to change the situation, so he suggests they enjoy their earnings and have a fancy dinner instead. Later, Lost and Narcina are seated at their table, enjoying one of Mary's best dishes. As they eat, Narcina brings up a question that's been on her mind. She points to the giant stone pillar on the edge of town and asks what it is. At first, she thought it was a building, but since it has no windows or doors, and it doesn't resemble a monument, it's left her confused. Lost admits he's puzzled by it too. He once got curious and asked one of the workers about it while it was being constructed, but even they didn't know what it was for or who was funding its construction. Narcina is shocked that something like that could happen, but apparently an agent just appeared with money and blueprints, and no one ever met the financier. As odd as the situation is, Lost doesn't mind, figuring it's just some rich person's random project. And since the towers aren't hurting anyone, he's fine with it. However, he does wish some of that money could have been spent building a wall around the city, as it currently doesn't have one. Narcina agrees that a city wall would be nice, but with the number of adventurers in town, she's confident they could fend off any threats, whether from monsters or thieves. After dinner, they head back to their rooms. Before Lost goes to bed, Narcina calls him back. She clearly has something to say but struggles to get it out, eventually just wishing him a good night and heading into her room. Once inside, Narcina jumps onto her bed, upset that she couldn't muster the courage to tell Lost that she wanted to stay in the same room with him. It was too embarrassing to say out loud. Meanwhile, Lost lies in bed, his mind at ease now that he has such a great party member. Thanks to that little girl's motivation, he's been able to continue adventuring. Though he doesn't know if he'll ever meet her again, he's thankful for Narcina. In other news, Margulis has just found a new member for the Lightning Blade party. While he's thrilled to have Lyra join the team, Saberia doesn't seem to like her, and Armia is too shy to make eye contact. Now that the party is complete again, Margulis is eager to head out and finally defeat that Hydra once and for all. The party heads back to the swamp to confront the Hydra. Unfortunately, the creature hasn't grown its head back yet, so their task won't be as daunting. Margulis quickly devises a plan, suggesting that he and Lyra attack from the front. Armia provides magical support, and Saberia sneaks up from behind. He's just about ready to charge into action when Lyra calls for a timeout, pointing out that there's no way she, as a healer, can fight on the front lines. Margulis is confused since Lost, their former healer, always fought at the front with them. Lyra can't believe they made Lost fight on the front lines, but Saberia recalls that Lost didn't seem to mind and, in fact, often landed some strong hits. He even cut off one of the Hydra's heads. Lyra is shocked by this, but Margulis reassures her that he doesn't expect her to do the same. However, he asks if she can cast the detoxify spell to counter the Hydra's poison, which she confirms she can. With that settled, Margulis tells everyone to get into position to slay the Hydra. Meanwhile, back in town, Lost and Narcina have returned from their latest expedition into the labyrinth, and Amherst is pleased to see they've brought more gems to sell. She reminds Lost not to push Narcina too hard since she's still a new adventurer. Lost reassures her that he's being careful about their fights. Amherst is glad to hear that, but she notes that with just the two of them, there's a limit to what they can accomplish. She suggests they consider recruiting more party members to make things easier. Lost agrees that it might help, but ultimately decides it's not worth the hassle since he and Narcina are already making good money as it is. Amherst concedes, noting that with their current income, they could likely rent a house instead of staying at the inn. Narcina, surprised, hadn't realized it was possible to rent a house in the city. Amherst explains that staying at an inn limits how much equipment and items they can store, but renting a private room allows for much more space, though it's quite expensive. The real benefit, she adds with a grin, is the privacy, especially for male and female adventurers, which could allow for some late-night activities. Narcina suddenly seems very interested in this idea, though Amherst doubts anything like that would happen given how Lost hasn't reacted at all. Speaking of private houses, Lost recalls that when he was with Lightning Blade, they had a private house too, although they forced him to sleep in the storage closet, making his stay quite uncomfortable. Amherst laughs at how badly Lost was treated, but comforts him him by pointing out that, in the end, he was lucky to have been kicked out of Lightning Blade. Ever since his departure, Margulis and the rest of the party haven't been able to complete a single mission. Margulis, still baffled by their failures, can't understand why. Lyra, however, can easily tell that Margulis isn't strong enough to face a Hydra head-on, but he's too dense to realize it. Margulis hears her comment and is about to start yelling, but Lyra quickly tells him to be quiet so she can focus on healing Armia, who has been badly injured and poisoned. While Lyra concentrates on healing, Saberia admits to Margulis that, as much as she hates to say it, Lost might have been more valuable than they gave him credit for. Even though Lost wasn't great at healing, he still got the job done, and he was so oblivious that he didn't even realize they were scamming him out of his money, making him the ideal party member. Margulis, now regretting kicking Lost out, wishes he hadn't quit, but Saberia reminds him that it was actually Margulis who threw Lost out of the party, making a big show of it too. Margulis, having completely forgotten about that, figures it should be easy to get Lost back. All they need to do is ask, and he's sure Lost will rejoin immediately since they're the famous Blades of Lightning who would refuse to join their party. By the next morning, Lyra has finished healing Armia, who wakes up and thanks her for the help. Lyra is just happy she could assist and asks if Armia feels well enough to eat. When Armia says she does, Lyra heads downstairs to fetch some food. However, upon reaching the main area, she realizes that Saberia and Margulis are nowhere to be found and has no clue where they went. Meanwhile, Margulis and Saberia are at the guild, where Margulis loudly announces that he's willing to graciously allow Lost to return to the party. Everyone in the room stops and stares in disbelief, with Lost being the most shocked. He asks Margulis to repeat himself because there's no way he heard that right. But Margulis repeats his offer, and Lost, still incredulous, doesn't know how to respond to such a ridiculous request. Nearby, Narcina and Amherst notice the commotion, and Amherst explains to Narcina that the blonde guy is the leader of the party that kicked Lost out, now trying to win him back while being condescending. Lost isn't amused, but before he can speak, Margulis, assuming Lost is upset about the money they scammed from him, apologizes and claims it was an honest mistake. He promises that Lost will get a fair share this time, and admits that the new healer he hired isn't much use in combat. Saberia doubts Lost will agree to rejoin, but to her shock, Lost thanks Margulis for the offer. Narcina, outraged at the idea of Lost leaving her party, rushes in front of him, yelling that he'll never join Margulis' group again. Lost places a reassuring hand on her shoulder, telling her not to worry, he's not going anywhere. He then turns to Margulis and explains that his earlier thanks were just him being polite, but he has no interest in ever rejoining their party. Margulis, stunned by the rejection, becomes desperate, accusing Narcina of using Lost because she realized how valuable he is. Margulis' aggressive pointing begins to annoy Lost, who grabs Margulis' hand and warns him that if he ever harms Narcina, he'll make sure Margulis' body will be left mangled beyond recognition. Lost then turns to leave, and Narcina pauses just long enough to rub Margulis' defeat in his face one last time. After they leave, Margulis is left clueless about what to do next, but he's still determined to defeat the Hydra. Frustrated, he yells at Amherst, demanding she recommend a new adventurer for his party, preferably someone who can handle the front lines with him. Amherst really doesn't want to deal with him, but it seems she won't have to because an adventurer steps out from the crowd. This guy looks like he's completed every side quest before showing up. The mysterious man offers to join Margulis' party and asks if he's satisfied with his level of strength. Margulis sizes him up. He definitely looks strong, but he still wants to test the man's sword skills. Margulis draws his sword and charges, but with a single swing, the man disarms Margulis, making him look foolish in front of the entire guild. Embarrassed, Margulis reluctantly agrees to let him join the party. Saberia, however, doesn't trust a man who constantly wears a mask, but Margulis insists they have no choice. If they don't defeat the Hydra soon, Lightning Blade's reputation will plummet. Margulis approaches the man and asks for his name, to which the man replies, Sig. Back at the inn where Lost and Narcina are staying, Narcina is checking herself in the mirror when she hears a knock on Lost's door. She goes to check and finds Sheila standing at Lost's door. For a moment, Narsina thinks Sheila might be trying to make a move on Lost, but after a bit of thought, she realizes that's unlikely. When Lost opens the door, Sheila informs him that he has visitors waiting downstairs. Lost is surprised but decides to meet with them to see what's going on. When he and Narsina head downstairs, they meet with Armia and Lyra. Armia, feeling awkward, apologizes for the sudden request and asks Lost if he could help them out just this once. Margulis still plans to go after the Hydra and has even hired a new warrior to assist, but Lyra doesn't think it will be enough. For one, Margulis refuses to buy antidote potions because he doesn't want to spend money, and she knows he won't realize how reckless he's being until someone ends up dead. Armia admits it's too late to apologize, but she acknowledges that Lost is strong. If he hadn't cut off one of the Hydra's heads during their last fight, the entire party would have been wiped out. Lost shrugs it off, thinking he didn't do that much, but Lyra insists that without him, the party wouldn't have survived, especially since they were already fighting a Hydra missing 2 heads. Lost asks Armia what exactly she wants from him. Armia stands up, saying she wants him to fight with them because she's sure they can defeat the Hydra with his help. Essentially, she's asking him to rejoin Lightning Blade, but Lost, having already turned down Margulis earlier, gives the same answer. Narsina wonders aloud why Armia seems so determined to help Margulis when the situation must be horrible for her. Armia admits that Margulis has many flaws, too many to count, but even so, he's still her party member. Narsina becomes angry, pointing out that Lost was also Armia's party member, yet she did nothing to support him when he was being mistreated. Armia begins to cry, apologizing for her behavior. She explains that at the time, she was terrified of being kicked out of the party herself, as she was a new adventurer with nowhere else to go. She now understands how wrong it was and admits that Margulis was wrong for how he treated Lost. Despite that, she still doesn't want Margulis to die in a hopeless battle. Lyra steps in, telling Lost that Armia is sincere in her apology and has been tormented by her guilt for a long time. While she understands if Lost doesn't want to join the party again, she asks him to at least accept Armia's apology. Lost gets up and tells Armia that he doesn't hold a grudge against her, so he accepts her apology. However, he still has no intention of returning to Lightning Blade. Armia is disappointed but respects his decision and promises not to ask him again. Just then, Mary arrives with a feast, hoping to cheer Armia up since she looks like she hasn't eaten well in a while. While Armia eats, Lost talks with Lyra, asking if there's any way for her and Armia to leave Margulis' party. Lyra explains that if they could have left, they wouldn't be asking for his help in the first place. Lost, knowing how poorly Margulis treats people, suggests Lyra leave the party anyway, but she refuses, saying she can't abandon Armia to fend for herself under Margulis' reckless leadership. The next day, Margulis introduces Lyra to Sig, as they prepare to face the Hydra again. Lyra seems to recognize him from somewhere and pulls him aside for a word. She asks what he's doing here and why he's in disguise, but Sig denies knowing her and tries to walk away. As he does, Lyra notices the sword on his back, which once belonged to someone named Ronaldo. She accuses him of stealing it, but Sig denies it, claiming it was a gift. He clears himself of the theft accusation, but by admitting he knew Ronaldo, Lyra confirms that this is the same Sig she knew. However, she decides to keep his identity secret, sensing that it's important to him. Later in the day, Lost and Narsina head into the labyrinth as usual, but Lost can't help worrying about Armia and the rest of Lightning Blade. He has no idea if they're truly ready for the battle they're about to face. Down in the labyrinth, Lost is allowing Naru to handle some mid-level monsters on her own, and she's been doing impressively well. However, all that movement has left her feeling quite hungry, so Lost suggests they take a break for lunch. Naru is happy to hear this, and she brings out the food she packed. But for just a simple lunch, it looks a bit extravagant. Naru explains that Armia didn't eat much of the meal Mary made for her yesterday, so before they left this morning, Mary handed the leftovers to Naru, urging her to have it for lunch so it wouldn't go to waste. While they eat, Lost shares some lore about the Hydra, explaining that its body is covered in tough muscles that make it hard to pierce. The Hydra is also venomous and has scales that deflect both physical and magical attacks, making it a formidable opponent. This description leaves Naru wondering if Armia will be able to handle a monster like that in battle. However, Lost reassures her that an antidote for the Hydra's venom was developed and is being sold in Marmot, so they don't need to worry about poisoning. But Naru reminds him that Margulis refused to buy it, which he had kind of forgotten, leaving the team in trouble if they get poisoned. Thus, they'll have to rely on Lyra's detoxification spell instead. Marcina is visibly concerned about Armia and the team, but Lost assures her that they can manage fine without him. Although Margulis can be a bit of a fool, he's still a capable swordsman when he actually prepares. Saberia is also quick on her feet, so she should be able to avoid most of the Hydra's attacks. In any case, it's something for Lightning Blade to handle independently, and they'll likely manage. Lost then stands, suggesting they continue, but Naru, feeling tired of exploring the same labyrinth repeatedly, wants to try something new. Conveniently, there's a swamp nearby that she wants to check out, not because she's concerned about Armia, of course. Meanwhile, in the swamp, Lightning Blade is battling the Hydra. With his exceptional skills, Zig manages to deal the Hydra a serious wound, and though he could finish it off, he decides to hold back, landing back on the ground. Margulis asks Zig why he didn't deliver the final blow, and Zig, having his own reasons, convinces Margulis by saying it would be much cooler for the party leader to defeat the Hydra. Margulis agrees, charging forward to attack again. Lyra wishes Margulis wouldn't always rush in head first, but Saberia remarks that it's just his way. Lyra finishes healing her, allowing Saberia to rejoin the fight. From Lyra's perspective, Zig is the strongest in their party, but he seems to have no intention of jumping back into the fray, leaving it up to the others to finish the Hydra. Despite Zig's absence, his previous attacks have left the Hydra weakened and sluggish, as long as Saberia successfully distracts it. Margulis's frontal attack strategy should actually work. Armia is also keeping the Hydra occupied with her magic, so it seems like they're on track to win. But just as things are going their way, the Hydra throws a rock, knocking Armia down. It then menacingly looms over her, and the fear emanating from her body is so intense that it becomes visible, a rare phenomenon that usually only occurs when there's an abnormally high concentration of mana, such as in the labyrinth. The Hydra takes advantage of this and begins to evolve, creating a truly terrifying situation, one that the others can't handle alone. Zig steps in, asking Lyra to tend to Armia and urging Margulis to retreat, but Margulis refuses, thinking the Hydra is weak enough to finish off. He leaps, aiming to slash the Hydra's head off, but his sword shatters on impact, leaving him defenseless as the Hydra prepares to counterattack. Just in time, Lost arrives with Naru and deflects the Hydra's attack. The Hydra retreats momentarily, and Zig thanks Lost for stepping in. Lost tells him they'll handle things from here and asks him to check on Armia, who's hurt. Lyra has already begun healing her, but the injuries are severe, and as wizards are resistant to magic, Lyra's healing is less effective. Lost offers to heal her instead, and although Lyra doubts it will make a difference, she's surprised when Lost repeatedly casts healing spells, eventually restoring Armia. She finds this technique absurd, yet Margulis and Saberia seem unfazed, thinking it's common practice. Soon, Armia regains consciousness and gratefully thanks Lost for coming to her aid, but she quickly drifts back to sleep. Lost has addressed most of her injuries, so she just needs rest to recover. However, as he thinks his job is done, the Hydra issues a battle cry, loosely translated as, "Lost, come at me, I want a rematch." Zig was planning to finish it, but since it seems fixated on Lost, he offers him the opportunity to take it down. Lost agrees, and since he's going in, Naru insists on joining him. Despite his warnings, she refuses to back down, agreeing only to retreat if she feels in danger. With the arrangement in place, Zig warns the others not to get involved for their own safety. Naru throws the first punch, disorienting the Hydra, and Lost follows up by slicing one of its heads. Zig joins, managing to slash off another head. Margulis is astonished, realizing Zig is far stronger than he initially thought, but he wonders how Zig's sword withstood the Hydra when his own shattered on contact. Lyra explains to Margulis that Zig is using a special magic sword, far more powerful than any ordinary weapon. Magic swords are extremely rare, so Margulis finds himself wondering who Zig really is and how he managed to acquire such a weapon. The fight continues, and Naru tries to land another punch on the Hydra's sternum. However, she loses her footing, allowing the Hydra to knock her out cold. It could easily finish her off, but instead, it fixes its gaze on Lost, signaling that it's tired of being ambushed and wants a fair one-on-one. If Lost doesn't agree, it'll end Naru right then. Saberia can't believe the Hydra is not only smart enough to communicate just through vibes, but also capable of taking a hostage. Lost has no choice if he wants to ensure Naru's safety, so he asks Zig and Lyra not to interfere. Lost then charges at the Hydra alone, but soon enough, the Hydra knocks him down as well. This anticlimactic display leaves Zig disappointed, as he was expecting more from Lost. If that's all Lost has, Zig is ready to finish off the Hydra himself. However, as Lost is about to lose consciousness, he reaches out instinctively to protect Naru. Suddenly, energy begins pouring from his body, and he gets back up to face the Hydra. Something is clearly different about him, and before the Hydra can react, Lost dashes forward and, in one swift motion, slices off all the Hydra's heads. After the Hydra's defeat, Lost loses consciousness again. When he wakes, he finds Naru standing over him, checking if he's okay. Though he assures her he's fine, he's more worried about her health since she took a direct hit from the Hydra. Naru reassures him, saying she's alright thanks to an emergency antidote potion that Lyra provided. However, the potion was expensive, so Lyra remarks she'll be charging him for it later. Putting that aside, Lyra asks what exactly happened to him earlier, but Lost has no idea what she's referring to. Just then, Margulis steps in, showering Lost with compliments on his strength and attempting to persuade him to rejoin his party. Lost cuts him off, stating firmly that he'll never rejoin Margulis's group. But Margulis continues, mentioning that the Hydra dropped several valuable magic stones and offering to split the reward 3 ways if Lost joins them. Lost finds it strange that Margulis only intends to split it 3 ways, so he asks what Margulis means by that. Margulis clarifies that he'll be splitting it only with himself, Saberia, and Lost, while the others get nothing. Since Lyra and Zig are newcomers, he says he doesn't care about them. And as for Armia, since she gets scared and hurt so often, he considers her useless and has even thought of selling her off as a slave to get rid of her. At this point, Lost has heard enough, but before he can act, Naru beats him to it, knocking Margulis to the ground. Margulis begins whining, claiming it's against guild rules for adventurers to fight each other, and threatens to report Naru to have her expelled. He demands if everyone saw what happened, but conveniently, everyone was stricken with temporary blindness when Naru struck him. However, what they did witness was Margulis and Saberia discussing the idea of selling Armia as a slave, which violates guild rules as human trafficking. Zig, unable to overlook such a crime, uses his authority to place them under arrest. Back at the guild, it's revealed that Zig is a direct adventurer of the royal family. He had received reports of declining security in this town due to adventurers' misconduct and was sent to investigate. Upon his arrival, he encountered Margulis and Saberia. Lyra asks him what will happen to them, and according to the guild's rules, not only will they be expelled, but they'll also face charges for human trafficking, which could lead to a lifetime of forced labor in prison at best. Hearing this, Margulis and Saberia panic, pleading with Zig to spare them. As they can't imagine spending the rest of their lives in prison, they appear so desperate that Lost almost pities them, so he asks Zig for a private word. Zig agrees, and Lost explains that while Margulis and Saberia aren't the best people, they once shared dreams of being adventurers, just as he did. Over time, that dream shifted into a quest for fame and fortune, which led to their current obsession. Lost's point is that while most would have given up on them by now, he still wants to give them another chance to become better adventurers. Surprised by Lost's forgiveness, Zig ultimately agrees to let them off with a warning, but warns that any more trouble from them will result in severe consequences. Taking the hint, Margulis and Saberia quickly flee to get as far from Zig as possible. Once they're gone, Amherst asks if it's truly okay to let them off so easily. Zig responds that expelling them wouldn't necessarily make them better people, so he'll be monitoring them to see if they genuinely reform. Meanwhile, Naru apologizes to Lost, feeling responsible for dragging him into helping Margulis. Lost reassures her, saying it's alright, though he may never fully get over how Margulis and Saberia treated him when he was in their party. He feels much better now that they've left town. Later, Zig meets privately with Lyra, explaining the real reason he's in this city. He was tasked with overseeing Marmot because there have been an unusually high number of monster evolutions occurring here, indicating that something suspicious is happening. To investigate further, he'll need Lyra's help, so he asks her to join his party again, as they had done before. Lyra isn't against the idea, but says she'll only agree if Zig allows Armia to join, as she needs somewhere to go. Zig has no objections. In fact, it works well for him since a larger party will enhance his surveillance efforts, and there's a particular adventurer he's become interested in. The following day, Zig and the others gather for breakfast with Lost and Naru. They share their decision to team up and form a party, which surprises Naru, yet their group composition seems well-rounded, as they have a warrior, a healer, and a mage. Naru asks Armia if she is comfortable with this arrangement, and Armia expresses that she's more than grateful. Without Zig and Lyra, she would have been left without a place to go, and she feels deeply indebted to them for taking her in. After breakfast, Naru inquires about Lost's plans for the day. Unexpectedly, Lost says he wants to head to the guild. Normally, they wouldn't go there so early, but with all the chaos from the previous day, he forgot to exchange the Hydra magic gem for money, and he'd like to take care of that now. However, that's not his only reason for visiting. He's also considering taking on a quest from the guild, a way they could earn money besides selling magic gems. Naru knows that guild quests often involve tasks like slaying monsters, retrieving special items, or acting as bodyguards, all in exchange for payment. However, she's never thought about taking on a quest herself. Lost tells her that if she wants to advance as an adventurer, she'll need experience not only in fighting monsters, but also in completing quests. Naru is touched that Lost is thinking of her well-being, but when he notices her silence, he asks if something is wrong. His face ends up too close, leaving Naru flustered and trying to change the subject. Soon after, they arrive at the guild, where they sense an uncomfortable tension as all eyes seem to be on them. Naru wonders why the atmosphere feels so unfriendly until Lost overhears some adventurers whispering about how he defeated the Hydra alone. Understanding the situation, he pulls Naru aside to warn her. Since the guild members know about their fight with the Hydra, some may attempt to steal the valuable Hydra magic stone from them. Just then, a group of adventurers approaches from behind, and Lost recognizes their leader, Marnell. Marnell requests to speak with Lost privately, but Lost feels wary, sensing a potential ambush. Noticing Lost's apprehension, Marnell instructs his group to wait outside, acknowledging that their presence might be intimidating. Apologizing for the misunderstanding, Marnell explains that his companions became curious upon hearing how Lost, once considered incompetent, managed to slay a Hydra alone. Before diving into their questions, Marnell offers a heartfelt apology. He admits that everyone in the guild was aware of how Margulis mistreated Lost, yet none of them stepped in. They all ignored his struggles, preferring not to get involved, and even mocked him behind his back. Though Marnell didn't wrong Lost personally, he acknowledges his guilt in turning a blind eye and hopes for forgiveness. Naru intervenes, declaring that Marnell's apology is unacceptable. She reminds him of the years of suffering and humiliation Lost endured and demands that the guild members beg for forgiveness on their hands and knees for 3 days straight. Lost quickly asks Naru not to push things too far, knowing that if they did such a thing, he'd be seen as the villain. Besides, despite slaying the Hydra, Lost still considers himself a subpar healer, capable of using only one healing spell. He doesn't believe the guild was entirely wrong to call him an ignoramus. Demonstrating his humility, Lost tells Marnell it's fine if people still call him Lost the Ignoramus, and extends his hand as a gesture of goodwill. Marnell shakes Lost's hand and promises to support him if he ever needs help in the future. With that settled, Lost and Naru bring the Hydra gem to Amherst for appraisal. Amherst is astounded, as the gem's composition has been altered significantly due to the Hydra's mutation. making it worth over 10 times its original value. Mutated monster stones are rare, and a Hydra's mutated gem is especially extraordinary. However, the fact that a Hydra mutated in the wetlands raises concerns. Monster mutations require massive mana reserves, and the wetlands typically lack the necessary mana. While mana accumulation outside the labyrinth is possible, it's rare for it to occur naturally. Moreover, Lost and Naru recently encountered a high-level orc on the labyrinth's upper floors, which adds to the mystery. Curious about why the guild hasn't launched an expedition to investigate these strange occurrences, Naru asks for an explanation. Handsome, the branch manager, walks by at that moment, and Lost and Naru decide to report everything to him. In Handsome's office, they detail their encounters with high-level monsters and the Hydra's mutation outside the labyrinth. However, Handsome seems indifferent. Lost tries to stress the seriousness of the situation, warning that other adventurers could be in danger if the source of the increased monster strength isn't identified. Handsome dismisses his concerns, coldly stating that if adventurers die because of this, they were probably unfit to survive anyway. Lost realizes that Handsome has no intention of investigating the recent events. Still, even if Handsome isn't willing to take action, Lost suggests that at the very least, a warning should be issued to inform others of the new dangers. However, Handsome, seemingly harboring a personal grudge against Lost, instead tells him to either stop complaining or leave town. Frustrated and getting nowhere, they leave Handsome's office, and Naru is visibly furious about his attitude. Lost tries to calm her, suggesting that perhaps Handsome is just too busy to deal with their concerns, but Naru clarifies that she's angry because of how Handsome treated Lost, with no reason to be so hostile. Amherst overhears and explains that Handsome has always been like that. The guild master, Mr. Mist, is old and reclusive, rarely leaving their office, which has left Handsome in charge. Though Handsome might not be the best person for the job, he keeps things running smoothly, so there aren't many complaints. The main issue is his tendency to expect perfection, often berating people over minor mistakes, which Amherst admits really irritates her. Putting that aside, Lost has a favor to ask Amherst. As he's hoping to take on a quest with Naru, Amherst is happy to assist and pulls out a list of available quests. Letting Lost browse through them, most seem mundane, including one from someone looking for a fishing buddy in the labyrinth. Much to Naru's disappointment, Amherst understands why Naru might find it lame, but reminds her that it's still a paid, official job and shouldn't be dismissed lightly. As Lost continues to scan the list, he comes across a more exciting quest involving monster slaying, which immediately catches Naru's interest. This particular quest involves subjugating a phoenix near a mid-level teleportation circle. It promises a hefty reward, but Amherst is hesitant to let them take it. Their party, consisting only of a healer and a martial artist, stands little chance against a flying phoenix without a long-range attacker. Amherst says she'd only approve if they had a warrior, a mage, and another healer capable of area-wide healing. Lost considers this and recalls a party he knows that fits the criteria perfectly. Later, Lost meets with Zig and the others to discuss the Phoenix subjugation mission. Lyra and Zig are on board, especially since it gives Zig an excuse to watch over Lost. Before they finalize their agreement, Lyra asks Armia if she's willing to join them. Armia says she's fine with it, but wonders if Lost really wants her there. Given how she treated him in the past, Lost reassures her that he isn't upset, and that as long as she acknowledges her previous behavior was wrong, he trusts her to do better. With everyone agreeing to work together, they begin preparing for the mission and head to the market to buy the necessary gear. While shopping, Lost mentions wanting to stop by a medicine shop to pick up some creams, as burn wounds heal faster when treated with medicine in addition to healing magic. Naru is impressed by Lost's knowledge of adventuring, but starts to feel insecure, worrying that he doesn't need her anymore since he's so self-sufficient. As she's lost in thought, someone sneaks up behind her and grabs her. Naru reacts instinctively, throwing a punch, but the attacker, far more skilled, dodges with ease and jumps back. When Naru gets a proper look, she realizes she knows the woman, Ralma, also known as the Fire Goddess Adventurer, who is close to Naru's father. Ralma was sent to check on Naru, who had practically run away from home. She assumes the man beside Naru is the reason for her departure, but upon recognizing Lost, She recalls him as well. The three head to a nearby restaurant to talk, where Lost explains to Naru that he briefly trained under Ralma. Though she considers him a terrible student, Ralma points her fork at Lost and demands to discuss something private with Naru, asking him to leave. Lost stands firm, saying he won't leave because he's part of Naru's party, and he's worried Ralma might try to force Naru back home. Amused by his boldness, Ralma conjures a small fireball and launches it at him, but Lost remains unfazed and easily dodges. Impressed by his progress, Ralma lets him stay. Before they get into the discussion, Naru clarifies that she didn't exactly run away, she simply forgot to inform her parents in person, and only left a note about leaving to be with a man nearly a decade older than her. Hearing this, both Lost and Ralma are shocked, and Lost begins to understand why her parents were so worried. Ralma assures Naru that her parents aren't opposed to her adventuring, but wanted Ralma to make sure she was safe. Now that she sees Naru with Lost, Ralma is convinced she'll be alright and decides there's no need to intervene. Satisfied, Ralma allows them to continue their shopping. Glad she checked on Naru. However, she reveals that she has another reason for being in town, investigating Mr. Mist, the guild master, as she suspects something sinister is unfolding. The following day, the group enters the labyrinth using a teleportation circle, with Naru staying vigilant the moment they emerge, much to her surprise. Though the Phoenix is nowhere in sight, she had expected they would need to confront it immediately upon arrival. However, Lost explains that the Phoenix wouldn't be able to fit in this area. While Phoenixes aren't always enormous creatures, the passageway here is far too narrow for any Phoenix to squeeze through. Therefore, the group decides to venture further into the labyrinth in search of it. Monsters with wings tend to avoid confined spaces like these. Eventually, the group comes across a wide open area, which looks exactly like a Phoenix's preferred habitat. According to the info Lyra got about this place, it is apparently newly discovered, meaning there are a lot of unexplored paths and unclaimed treasure to be found. Both Naru and Armia are excited to hear that. But there's one problem: the Phoenix is in the way of the unexplored territory, so no adventurers have been able to go in, which is why the guild put out a bounty on it. Lost examines the area and finds some scorch marks on one of the broken pillars. Now that he has confirmation that the Phoenix was indeed here, he throws a rock out into the room to make noise and lure the Phoenix to his location. Soon enough, the Phoenix appears in all its fiery majesty, and the group stands prepared to face it. Meanwhile, back at the guild, Amherst is slumped at her desk, utterly bored, when suddenly Ralma walks in. Instantly intrigued, Amherst eagerly rushes over to be the first to greet her. Ralma is taken aback by Amherst's unusually friendly approach, especially considering her position as guild staff, and her surprise is justified, as Amherst typically isn't kind to adventurers. However, with just one glance at Ralma, Amherst senses that she's far from an ordinary adventurer. Amherst has no idea who Ralma is or what her title may be, but with all the expensive magic items Ralma is wearing, Amherst is sure she must be rich. She asks how she can help Ralma, so Ralma tells her she wants to meet with the guild branch president. Amherst is a bit taken aback since the branch president never accepts visitors, so she asks if Ralma has some sort of appointment, but Ralma never made one. Amherst then asks if Ralma happens to be a friend of the branch president, but Ralma denies that although she does have a relationship with the branch president, it's more like she wants to kill him. After Ralma mentions this, Amherst bluntly replies that she can't assist her, especially after Ralma essentially confessed to attempting to kill the branch president. Her friendly demeanor vanishes as she starts calling Ralma a fool, but Ralma doesn't have the patience for this and decides to proceed with her plan by setting the place ablaze. As Amherst runs off, Ralma sets her sights on the branch president's office. Just before she makes her move, Handsome appears behind her and stops her. He calmly tells Ralma that she can come to him if she needs anything, and he warns Amherst that Ralma is known as the Fire God. If she chose to, she could reduce everyone in this building to ashes, so Amherst should leave before she provokes Ralma any further. Back in the labyrinth, the Phoenix hasn't come down at all, so neither the swordsman nor Naru is going to be able to attack it with how things are going. Lost wishes he had brought a bow instead of the sword, but Naru thinks they should be fine since it's not like the Phoenix can attack them from way up there. She was wrong. The phoenix totally can attack from that distance, and it aimed its fireball straight at Naru. Lost had to jump in to save her. After he gets her to safety, he explains that while the phoenix also attacks with its claws and fiery body, it can also launch long-distance fireballs, which makes it tricky to handle. At the guild, Ralma meets with Handsome in his office. Before they begin, he asks if her complaint also concerns the situation in the labyrinth. Ralma is surprised that he brings it up, prompting Handsome to explain that a few adventurers had recently complained to him about the hazardous conditions within the labyrinth. Curious, Ralma asks how he responded to their complaint, and Handsome reveals that he simply told the adventurers to leave town if they didn't appreciate the working conditions. While that response may not seem entirely fair, Ralma's concern is different altogether. She has noticed that there are a lot of thugs in the city acting as adventurers, and she believes the guild is intentionally bringing them here. Handsome keeps a stone face and denies her claim. That's not the only thing Ralma wanted to talk about. There's also the matter of that giant pillar on the edge of the city and others like it all over town because she has a bad feeling about them. Handsome denies knowing anything about that, but Ralma accuses him of lying. Because for adventure towns like these, the guild branch president is basically the king. There's no way that Handsome could be the acting guild president and not have any idea about what those towers are. Handsome asks if she has any evidence to support her claims. If not, he suggests she should simply leave if she's unhappy with the situation here. This only deepens Ralma's suspicions since not only is the guild recruiting borderline criminals as adventurers, but they're also telling any decent adventurers who question the guild's actions to leave town. Although it's just speculation, Ralma suspects the guild might be orchestrating something that would involve sacrificing a large number of adventurers in this town. By filling the ranks with criminals who wouldn't be missed and driving out respectable adventurers, it seems like someone might be setting up for a labyrinth rampage. Down in the labyrinth, the group is still having trouble dealing with the phoenix and its fireballs. So far, none of them have been hit. But with all this fire, sooner or later, all the oxygen in the room is going to be burnt up, and they won't be able to stay any longer if that happens. Right now, the phoenix is just trying to drive them out to protect its territory, since it knows it can't beat the 5 of them in a fight, and that means they can escape if they need to. But they are here on a quest to take this thing down, so they've got no choice but to fight it. Zig asks Armia if she's familiar with water magic. While it's not her specialty, she replies that she can cast a wide area water attack. Even if she can't fully take down the phoenix, reducing a good number of its feathers should be enough to ground the creature, giving Zig a chance to finish it off. There's still a minor issue, as it will take Armia some time to prepare her spell. However, Zig assures her that he'll protect her until then. Lost and Naru will also be there to assist, so she can feel confident that the plan will succeed. Armia agrees to do it, so everyone charges forward and begins drawing the phoenix's attention. While they have it distracted, Lyra tells Armia to get ready, so she begins casting her spell and forms a water arrow. Once she is done casting, she fires at the phoenix, and the spell takes out one of the monster's wings, so it falls into Zig's range of attack. Once the opportunity is presented, Zig draws his sword and stabs into the phoenix's chest, but the cut was too shallow to be fatal. The phoenix is able to fly back up and perch on a nearby pillar. They may not have been able to take it down with that strike, but the wound Zig inflicted has done a considerable amount of damage to the phoenix. So if they keep up this pace, they should be able to defeat it. At the guild, Handsome tries to brush off Ralma's claim that a labyrinth rampage is imminent. However, considering the recent events in town, Ralma is convinced it's more than a possibility. The most alarming sign is the Hydra incident, where it evolved outside the labyrinth. Despite Handsome's attempts to disregard these growing issues, he can't ignore the fact that the ambient mana levels in the area have recently spiked to extreme heights. In fact, as they're having this conversation, the phoenix down in the labyrinth begins to exploit the elevated mana levels and starts evolving. Lost's group sees this, but by the time they realize what's going on, it's too late to stop it, as the phoenix has already transformed and is now glowing bright blue. Naru is confused because Lost told her evolutions are supposed to be rare, and Lost is just as confused as she is. 2 high-level evolutions happening in the span of a few days is completely unheard of. Armia starts freaking out after the monster evolves. If she ends up passing out in fear like last time, since monsters feed on fear, she's basically going to become a power plant for the Phoenix. On top of that, if Armia isn't able to overcome her fear on her own, she's always going to be a useless adventurer. The Phoenix senses Armia's fear and instantly targets her, hurling an oversized fireball in her direction. With enough time to dodge, Lyra shouts for Armia to move, but Armia is paralyzed by fear, leaving Lyra no choice but to rush over and pull her aside. Yet, they're not quick enough to completely escape. Just before they're about to be engulfed, Zig leaps in, slicing the fireball in two. He made a vow to keep Armia safe, and he's determined to uphold it. Urgently, he urges Armia to stand up and fight alongside him. Hearing this, Armia finally snaps out of it and realizes that her friends are going to die if she doesn't get her act together. She apologizes to them, but she's ready to cast her spell, although she's going to need them to buy her some time. Naru is the first to run out and attack the Phoenix since it's within her strike range, but even though she lands a clean hit, the Phoenix takes no damage, and Naru's fist catches on fire. Luckily, it's just her glove that was on fire, but now she's starting to reconsider the viability of boxing the Firebird. The Phoenix returns for another assault, and with Naru unable to defend herself, Lost steps in, using his sword to shield her from the attack. Unfortunately, the Phoenix's flames are unbearably intense. Though he successfully protects Naru from being burned, his sword is destroyed in the process. Fortunately, while Naru and Lost were fending off the Phoenix, Armia had just enough time to complete her next spell. Though casting 2 attack spells in quick succession is challenging, she manages to unleash a powerful ice arrow that strikes the Phoenix, taking out one of its wings. Zig then runs out in an attempt to finish off the Phoenix, but at the last second, it starts flying again, and Armia doesn't have enough energy to fire another spell. It looks like they might be in trouble, but just then, Naru comes up with an idea. She starts climbing up some broken pillars until she's above the Phoenix. Now that she has the high ground, she uses a spirit kick to knock the Phoenix back to the ground. The second she does, Lost shows up and uses his dagger to finish it off. Once the Phoenix vanishes, everyone gathers around to congratulate Armia for her outstanding performance, as her attack magic was crucial to their victory. Overwhelmed with relief and pride for finally being helpful, Armia tears up, expressing her gratitude to the group for their encouragement. While Armia goes to retrieve the magic crystal, Zig and Lyra exchange words, noting how Lost didn't transform as he had during their previous encounter. They're still unsure what triggered it last time, but until Zig can uncover what's happening with Lost, he knows he'll need to keep a close watch on him. The group returns to the inn after that, and Ralma is already there waiting for them. She congratulates Lost for successfully taking down the Phoenix, and Lost appreciates it, but wonders how Ralma could have possibly known about it. Ralma mentions that she met a particular guild receptionist earlier today, who told Ralma everything about Lost's mission in exchange for some money. Since Lost and the others came back alone, Ralma assumed they must have succeeded, and that means they will get a lot of money from it. So, she asks Lost to treat her to dinner. Lost reluctantly agrees, though he warns Ralma to go easy on the alcohol, knowing she can't handle it. Predictably, she ignores his advice. When the food arrives, Naru compliments the dishes, saying they're fantastic, but Ralma remarks that she prefers the food served at the mansion. Armia is puzzled by Ralma's mention of a mansion, and since none of the others seem aware of Naru's background, Ralma reveals that Naru is the daughter of Earl Anelstria. This revelation shocks everyone, but it's especially surprising to Lost, as he suddenly realizes that the girl he saved years ago was, in fact, Naru. Later that day, Handsome goes to meet with the guild branch president in his office and informs him that there was yet another mutation. But he also has other news to report. So he tells the branch president that Ralma is in town. This pleases the president, as having his disciple nearby is going to be beneficial for their plan. The following day, Lost and Naru head to the guild to trade the Phoenix magic gem for money. When Amherst presents their payment, Naru is immediately furious. It appears far too small, considering the immense value of Phoenix gems, and the fact that this particular Phoenix was an evolved one. Naru expects it to be worth significantly more. She jumps to the conclusion that Amherst must be attempting to cheat them, if this is all they're being offered. However, while Amherst is certainly known for being a shrewd opportunist, she's not a thief. She calmly reassures Naru that the amount in the pouch matches the gem's value and suggests she take a closer look. Typically, the guild pays adventurers in silver coins, but since it would require hundreds of thousands of them to cover the gem's worth, Amherst decided to simplify things by exchanging the payment entirely in gold coins instead. Naru is stunned once she sees that Amherst was telling the truth and doesn't really know what to say at this point. Lost just tells her to accept the coins already and pays Amherst her fee before walking off without another word. Amherst is always happy to receive money, but she notices that Lost seems a lot quieter than usual. She asks Naru if anything happened between the two of them. Naru follows Lost outside, and the two of them sit down to have a snack, but Lost still isn't saying anything. Naru is forced to break the silence and says there's something she's been meaning to ask Lost about. Since they just got paid a large sum of money, she asks if he would like to rent a detached house with her. Lost is caught off guard by the sudden suggestion, but Naru has a solid reason for bringing it up. Given their current funds, renting a private house is both more cost-effective and secure than continuing to stay at a hotel. Naru has already taken the time to research the local housing market, and not only can they afford to rent a house, but they could even purchase one outright if they chose to. While Lost agrees with her reasoning, he wonders if there's a specific reason she's bringing this up now, perhaps an issue with Mary's hotel. Naru reassures him that there's nothing wrong with the hotel, it's cozy. The food is excellent, and its popularity is well deserved. However, precisely because it's so popular, it's always crowded. What Naru won't admit is that she's yearning for a private space where she and Lost can have long, uninterrupted conversations. From there, perhaps, they might grow close enough to develop a more intimate connection. Naru starts getting embarrassed by her unholy thoughts, and Lost has no idea what she's thinking. He tells her that it's still too early for them to buy a house together. He believes it's better if they save their money in case of a future emergency. Besides, they still have to consider the situation with the others. After they got back from the Phoenix hunt, Zig suggested they should all form a permanent party together since they work really well as a team. Although Lost hasn't given him an answer yet, he is seriously considering it. If they plan to go into the deeper floors of the labyrinth eventually, Lost and Naru are going to have a difficult time making it on their own. That's why Lost wants to add new members to the team, specifically Zig, because he is clearly a very strong adventurer. Naru doesn't like the idea of sharing Lost's attention, but she can't argue with his point about the importance of having strong teammates. Reluctantly, she agrees to join forces with Zig and the others to form a party. Later that day, Lost and Naru meet up with the group, and they officially decide to merge their parties. Zig raises a toast to celebrate the start of their new team. Overhearing the festivities, Mary decides to treat everyone to a special meal. Once everyone has finished eating, Armia is completely stuffed and practically in a food coma. As it's getting late, Lyra decides to take Armia to bed, hoisting her up and dragging her upstairs. As Lyra continues walking to the stairs with Armia, Naru comes up to her and says there's something she wants to talk about. They head up together, and after getting Armia into bed, Naru tells Lyra about the conversation she had with Lost earlier about buying a house together. Lyra is impressed by how bold Naru was to ask Lost to live with her, but Naru says Lost rejected her idea, so she's starting to think he might hate her. Lyra assures Naru that Lost doesn't hate her. It's much more likely that he just doesn't want to rush into things because he cares about her so much. Lost doesn't seem like the kind of person to be shy about this kind of stuff, but every man has their own personality. Lyra advises Naru to be patient with him. Naru expresses her gratitude to Lyra for the helpful advice, admitting she's glad she sought her out because she trusted Lyra to provide great relationship insights. However, all of Naru's compliments only serve to remind Lyra that she's never actually had a boyfriend. Meanwhile, as Lyra and Naru are having their chat upstairs, Lost and Zig are discussing the same subject downstairs. Zig suggests that Lost should just agree to live with Naru. After all, it's not as though they're getting married, and Naru clearly holds him in high regard. Zig adds that even if Lost were to turn her down, it likely wouldn't hurt her feelings too much. Zig asks Lost if he dislikes the idea of living with Naru, but that's not true at all. She's the one who gave him hope when he was at a low point in his life, and she even came all the way to the city just to form a party with him, so he could never hate her. But Zig can tell that Lost is still too embarrassed to admit that he likes her. Back to Lyra and Naru's conversation. Lyra starts talking about her romantic history. When she lived in the royal capital, several men were trying to earn her affection so much so that they would join her party just to get closer to her. Zig was one of these guys. One day, while Zig was away, a man tried to make an unwanted advance on Lyra completely out of nowhere. Lyra, however, wasn't about to let that slide. She knocked him out cold and dragged him outside. She was ready to move on, but when Zig found out what happened, forgiveness wasn't on the table. He threw the man out of the city and then disappeared from the city himself. Lyra still doesn't know what was going through Zig's mind at the time, but Zig later confides in Lost about the incident. He admits that he was furious with himself for not being there to protect Lyra and, as a result, didn't know how to face her after leaving the royal capital. A lot of time passed, and Zig ended up coming to this city for a mission, but he never could have expected to run into Lyra here. To top it off, she was even willing to form a party with him after learning of his mission, even though she must have been angry at him. Although Lyra was never angry at him to begin with, she was just upset that he disappeared without talking to her at all. Since then, she's had no idea how Zig feels about her. Just then, Sheila walks into the room and says that if Lyra is this bothered by it, then she must have feelings for him. Downstairs, Zig apologizes to Lost for burdening him with his story. Shifting back to the original topic, he presses Lost again, asking why he turned down Naru's offer to live together. Lost admits he's not entirely opposed to the idea. In fact, it made him genuinely happy to hear Naru say she wanted to live with him. However, there's something he needs to confirm before making a decision. At that moment, Amherst arrives at the inn, looking for Lost. She's brought the investigative report he requested. Zig is puzzled, as he wasn't aware that the guild conducted private investigations. Amherst quickly clarifies that this isn't guild business. Lost had personally requested her help, which is why she's delivering the report outside of regular hours. Amherst asks Lost if it's all right for her to discuss this in front of someone else at the table. Lost trusts Zig, so he says it's fine for him to know. Amherst begins her report on Naru. Naru is the only daughter of Earl and Elstria, and normally, Naru and whomever she chose to marry would inherit the title from her father. But one day, she suddenly announced that she wanted to become an adventurer. It isn't unheard of for a noble person to become an adventurer, but no parent would approve of their only child taking on such a dangerous job. The Earl was initially against the idea. However, that all changed one day when Naru woke up, and her hair had randomly turned blue. The main reason Lost didn't immediately recognize her was because of her different hair color. Although he was aware it had changed, he hadn't anticipated that it would transform completely overnight. The exact cause of Naru's sudden hair color change remains a mystery, but coincidentally, when it happened, the Earl abruptly stopped opposing her desire to become an adventurer. Lost can't help but question why the Earl would change his stance so suddenly. Zig suggests a theory. Perhaps the Earl believes Naru's time might be short and wants to allow her the freedom to enjoy life before it's too late. While it's a plausible explanation, Naru's current strength enough to punch a phoenix out of the sky makes it hard to imagine her dying anytime soon. Regardless of the reason, the fact of the matter is that Naru has her father's consent to be here, which is what Lost was worried about. He didn't want to doubt Naru when she said she was allowed to come here, but there was always the chance that she was lying because she wanted to be close to him. So, he had to make sure she had consent. After Amherst has been paid, she leaves, uninterested in this conversation. Once she's gone, Zig asks Lost what his plan would have been if he discovered that Naru's father objected to her adventure status. First off, Lost would have told her to go home temporarily to try and convince her parents properly. But even if that didn't work, he he would still offer Naru as much help as necessary, although it seems like he won't have to worry about that now. Upstairs, the girls are sorting through all the details. Naru, an earl's daughter, has trained tirelessly, left everything behind to be here after hearing Lost was expelled from his party, and even had the audacity to ask him to move in with her. They're all thoroughly impressed by Naru's boldness and determination in pursuing romance, leaving Lyra wishing she could be just as courageous. Eager to support her, the girls come up with a plan to help. They escort Lyra downstairs and all but push her into confessing her feelings to Zig. Gathering her courage, she timidly asks if they can have a private conversation outside. Though confused by the sudden request, Zig sees she's serious and agrees to join her. While they're outside, Lyra works up the courage to ask Zig to be her partner. Zig doesn't see what the big deal is since they are already part of the same party. But that's not what Lyra meant. She clarifies that she's talking about being partners for life. When she says this, it finally dawns on Zig that she's talking about a romantic partnership. All the girls are eagerly spying on the conversation from the door to see what Zig says, but he's too flustered to give an answer right now, so he tells her he'll think about it. Lyra isn't satisfied with this because she just poured her heart out, and all Zig could say is that he will think about it. Then again, Zig has never been the type of guy to plan ahead for this sort of thing, so she understands why he would want time to think about it. She's willing to wait. The girls are thrilled that everything worked out between those two. But then Lost shifts his attention to Naru. He asks if she has time to meet with him tomorrow, as there's something important he wants to discuss with her. Watch this next video on screen and subscribe to not miss next part. Deep within the labyrinth, a group of rookie adventurers finds themselves cornered by an orc on the upper floors, with no hope of defeating it. Their only option is to hide and wait for it to leave the area. Fortunately, the orc doesn't notice them and moves on, but as the group cautiously heads toward the exit, another orc appears and blocks their path. To make matters worse, the first orc begins doubling back, leaving them on the verge of being trapped from both sides if they don't act fast. Luckily, the leader of the group had anticipated a scenario like this and came prepared to ensure everyone's survival by bringing Keith. Unfortunately for poor Keith, this means he's not making it out alive, as the group uses him as bait to distract the orcs while they make their escape. Meanwhile, in town, Lost and the others are having breakfast together, but Naru is so lost in thought that she can barely focus on her food. Zig and Lyra are starting to get worried about her, and they assume she's acting this way because Lost said he had something important to tell her, but he never told her what it's about or when they would have this conversation. She's constantly daydreaming about what it might be. Lyra tells Lost that he should probably hurry up and have that discussion with Naru, but Lost doesn't want to rush into it because it's a very serious matter. However, if he doesn't get it over with soon, Naru is going to start eating flowers at some point, so he decides to have that talk after all. He goes over to Naru, and as soon as he calls her name, she nervously jumps up and asks what he needs. Lost tells Naru that he's ready to have the conversation they discussed earlier, and Naru eagerly waits to hear what he has to say. However, before Lost can get a word out, the door to the inn swings open, and to everyone's surprise, Keith stumbles in, somehow having survived being left behind in the labyrinth. Sheila immediately recognizes him and, clearly concerned, rushes over to check on his injuries. A little while later, Lost finishes healing Keith and reassures everyone that the kid will be fine, as his injuries weren't as severe as they initially appeared. For now, Lyra and Sheila will be looking after him, though the others find this arrangement a bit puzzling. It makes sense for Lyra, a healer, to tend to him, but why does Sheila need to be involved as well? Mary comes over and explains that Sheila has been friends with Keith since they were little. Keith is a labyrinth orphan, and he's the same age as Sheila, so Mary couldn't just abandon him, which is why she'd often let him hang out and eat with them. She grew fond of him, so she would have happily let him work at the inn, but Keith wanted to become an adventurer, so she let him follow his dreams. He even looked so happy when he told her he got accepted into his first party. But look at how that turned out for him. Lost apologizes to Naru, but he's going to have to talk to her later because there's something he needs to take care of first. Lost had already called in a favor to track down the adventurers who abandoned Keith in the labyrinth, and the guild members had given them a severe beating for their betrayal. They offer Lost the chance to decide the party's punishment, but he concludes that they've suffered enough and orders everyone to let them go. However, he sternly warns the group to stay far away from the city, making it clear they are not welcome back. The party quickly flees, while Amherst understands why Lost sought help to punish the group. She reminds him that disputes between adventurers are supposed to be handled through the guild, and she cannot approve of them taking justice into their own hands. The adventurers are enraged to hear that since the guild did absolutely nothing to stop those people from abandoning Keith in the first place, and it's not like they were taking any other actions to get justice. Amherst admits that the guild's response to these kinds of situations is pretty lacking, but she has orders for management that she has to follow. Just then, Handsome shows up and starts scolding the adventurers for daring to take matters into their own hands and banish that party. He tells them they had no right to do that, but the adventurers clap back and yell that Handsome has no right to say that to them when he did literally nothing to solve the problem. Lost urges everyone to settle down, assuring them that he will speak with Handsome to address their concerns. When Lost meets with Handsome, he lays out everything that happened. Although Handsome is still frustrated that the adventurers took matters into their own hands, hearing the full story helps him understand why they acted as they did. Lost then questions why Handsome doesn't implement measures to prevent situations like this, pointing out that other cities have policies in place to protect labyrinth orphans from being used as bait. Handsome responds with a straightforward question: would any of those policies actually be enforceable inside the labyrinth? He explains that while cities can pass all the rules and regulations they want, if those measures don't lead to real, meaningful change, then they're just a waste of time and resources. Lost asks if Handsome intends to just abandon all the labyrinth orphans that end up getting used as bait, but Handsome tells Lost he is mistaken about something. Handsome has always made it clear that anyone who doesn't like the way this city operates should leave. And that's not just because he doesn't like complainers, it's because he believes people should only become adventurers if they can handle it. This may be an adventurer's guild, but they've never once forced anyone to become an adventurer. And the same goes for Keith. If he can't handle the risks that come with the job, he should have chosen a different path in life. Lost wants to argue that Handsome is wrong, but deep down, he finds himself partially agreeing with him. Even so, he remains convinced that there has to be a way to address the issue and protect the labyrinth orphans. Handsome stands up and recalls something a man once told him. As an adventurer, the incompetent are as good as dead, so it's crucial to be prepared from the very beginning. He reminds Lost to keep those words in mind, revealing that he was the one who said them to Lost years ago. To jog his memory further, Handsome shows Lost a scar he earned during their time together. Years ago, when Lost was still starting out as an adventurer, he and Handsome got suckered into being the luggage carriers for a party of adventurers. Handsome was being treated particularly poorly, so Lost offered to help him carry some of his luggage to lighten Handsome's load. However, Handsome refused to accept any pity from someone as incompetent as Lost, so he told him to shut up and stop talking to him. Later that night, while the rest of the party was staying warm near the fire, Handsome was sitting out in the cold on his own, regretting his choice to accept this job, even if it paid decent money. A few hours later, after everyone had gone to bed, Lost woke Handsome and warned him about a large group of goblins heading their way. He told Handsome to alert the others while he stayed on watch a little longer, and Handsome quickly followed his instructions. Once the group was awake, Lost explained the situation. At first, the others couldn't believe it and asked if he was absolutely sure about what he had seen. But Lost was certain there were goblins approaching, far too many to count. When the group finally saw the horde for themselves, they were stunned. The sheer size of the goblin army made it clear that defeating them was out of the question. Their best chance at surviving was to run away, but the group leader thought it would be too risky to flee without a distraction. To buy some time, the party decided to use Lost and Handsome as bait to lure the goblins while they escaped, before Handsome realized what was going on. Both he and Lost were chucked off the side of a cliff and left behind. Handsome tried to call out for help, but Lost told him that those guys wouldn't be helping them. In fact, this might have been the reason the party decided to accept incompetent people like them in the first place. The situation infuriated Handsome, but there was nothing he could do about it until they escaped. He and Lost promised to make it out alive and get revenge on the party for abandoning them. The two fought valiantly against the goblins for as long as they could, but it became clear there was little they could do to stop such an overwhelming horde on their own. Forced to retreat, they took shelter inside a hollow tree to evade the goblins for a while. Handsome began to lose hope. Convinced there was no way to survive the horde, the thought of the rest of the party escaping at the cost of his life weighed heavily on him. However, not many people know this, but goblin hordes tend to target larger groups over individuals. If the goblins discovered the party, they would likely shift their focus entirely to attacking them. Just as Lost finished explaining this, the goblins spotted the party and immediately began charging toward them. While the party was being massacred, Lost and Handsome were able to sneak out of their hiding spot undetected. Handsome thought those guys deserved to die at the hands of the goblins after what they did, but Lost still wished he could help them since he didn't like the idea of anyone dying. However, it wasn't like he had the power to save them, so he told Handsome they should start heading back to town. Handsome was about to follow Lost, but all of a sudden, he collapsed in pain because of a severe injury on his arm from the battle. Lost was shocked and asked why Handsome didn't tell him sooner, but Handsome didn't want to make himself a burden in a life or death situation. Lost began healing Handsome, but Handsome quickly told him to stop, warning that the noise might attract the goblins. He urged Lost to leave him behind, blaming his own incompetence for their predicament. Handsome felt that someone as weak as him didn't deserve to live. Lost, refusing to accept this, yelled that he was wrong. He reminded Handsome that while the world might be unforgiving to those who struggle, there was always a chance for redemption. Together, the two mustered their strength, broke through the goblins' defenses, and made it back to the city. To Handsome, Lost had become his salvation, but the truth of Lost's words about the harshness of the world still weighed heavily on him. The only difference was that the incompetent ones that day were the adventurers who abandoned them without understanding the goblins' behavior patterns. After Lost and Handsome returned to the city, they went their separate ways. Handsome met a certain elder who took him in and taught him many things. Eventually, Handsome was able to stand on his own feet as a competent adventurer. The elder who took him in was the guild master Mist, which explained how Handsome became a guild employee and now acts as the guild master's right-hand man. Handsome hadn't shared this story with Lost just to reminisce about the past. He felt a deep sense of gratitude toward Lost for saving him that day and wanted to repay the favor. Handsome urged Lost to leave the city not as a threat, but as a sincere warning. He didn't want Lost to get entangled in the trouble that was soon to unfold. Lost, however, didn't fully grasp the meaning behind Handsome's words. As he left Handsome's office, he rejoined the other adventurers and informed them that he hadn't been able to convince Handsome to change his policies. Just then, Amherst pulled Lost aside and revealed that many people didn't agree with how the guild master was running things. She had a personal request for Lost. Later that day, Lost talked to Naru about the request Amherst gave him. Apparently, there had been a lot of monsters appearing on the roads near the city, so she asked Lost to handle it before there were any civilian casualties. Naru understood but wondered why the guild hadn't put out a bounty for those monsters. Something like that would require Handsome's approval, which wasn't going to happen. There was also the issue of criminal adventurers in the city, and Lost offered to help deal with that as well. Naru acknowledged that Lost's efforts were commendable, but pointed out that it sounded like a lot of extra work. Lost reassured her, explaining that Amherst had promised them bonus pay for dealing with the monsters on the road. While it wasn't an official guild-approved mission, the reward would come out of Amherst's own pocket. Although she wasn't thrilled about it, Amherst agreed it was fair compensation since Lost was going out of his way to help. Later that day, Handsome had a meeting with the guild master, during which he delivered a letter from the Prime Minister. The letter served as a reminder to keep a close eye on Naru. Puzzled by the Prime Minister's unusual interest in her, Handsome asked Mist for clarification. Mist recounted the tale of the evil dragon and the sleeping princess, a well-known fairy tale in which the princess sacrifices herself to vanquish the evil dragon. However, Mist explained that the story wasn't just a legend. it was actually a prophecy. The key sign that someone has been chosen by the gods to fulfill the role of the sleeping princess is the sudden appearance of blue hair, a detail that perfectly describes Naru. The group makes their way to the plains and soon spots the goblin horde responsible for attacking travelers in the area. Lyra proposes sneaking up on the goblins for an ambush or attacking them from a distance, but Lost argues that a direct attack would be more effective. He explains that attacking from afar would increase the chances of some goblins surviving and escaping, only for them to strike again later. By confronting them head-on, they can ensure that none of the goblins are left to flee. With that in mind, Zig suggests circling around the goblins to launch a frontal assault. The group agrees and begins moving across the field to execute their plan. By coincidence, this happens to be the same place where Lost and Naru first met all those years ago. But unlike back then, when the horde of goblins attacked, Naru isn't a helpless princess anymore, and Lost is now a capable fighter. They've both got each other's backs. After fighting for a while, all the goblins had been defeated, and the group was getting ready to head back to town. Suddenly, the ground starts shaking violently, both across the plains and within the city. It seems like the guild master might know something about what's happening. Once the tremors subside, Lost and the others quickly head back to town to make sure Mary is safe. Fortunately, no one was hurt, and the inn only suffered minor damage. However, the situation is far from over. Moments later, an adventurer bursts in, frantically searching for Lost, explaining that Marnell urgently needs his help at the town square. Lost and the others head over to the town square to see what the problem is. When they get there, Marnell is relieved to see that Lost actually showed up. He points to the fields outside the city. And even though Lost and the others just finished dealing with the huge horde of goblins, there's somehow an even bigger horde of goblins outside. There are even a few hobgoblins mixed in. If those goblins were to attack the town right now, after all the chaos from the earthquake, it would lead to an absolute massacre. Marnell is determined to prevent the goblins from reaching the city, which is why he wants to eliminate them before they get any closer. He asks Lost for his assistance. However, he admits that he hasn't reported this to the guild yet, meaning there's a good chance they won't be paid for their efforts. Lost and the others assure him that they don't mind as long as the town stays safe. Together, they set out and begin taking down the goblins one by one. When Lost faces off against the hobgoblin, he lands a decisive blow, slicing its arm off in a single strike. However, to his utter shock, the hobgoblin starts hurling death threats at him, and the regular goblins start doing the same. Everyone is freaked out because, as far as they know, goblins aren't meant to be able to talk, and this is the first time they've ever seen something like this. Nevertheless, the goblins' strange behavior doesn't change their mission. Lost tells everyone to stay focused on slaying the goblins as quickly as possible. Eventually, they succeed in defeating all the goblins, leaving only the injured hobgoblin. However, before it disappears like the others, it delivers a chilling proclamation. It declares that while the humans may have won this battle, they are destined to lose in the end. It warns that whatever is coming will ensure that no human survives. Once the hobgoblin vanishes, it leaves behind its magic crystal. From its structure, it's clear that this hobgoblin was an evolved form. Even so, Lost finds it strange, as he's never heard of an evolution granting a monster the ability to speak. He remains uncertain about what could have caused such a change. Just then, one of Marnell's friends comes running up and tells them that there's more trouble over by the labyrinth entrance. There are a ton of goblins gathered outside the entrance, at least 3 times the amount of those they fought outside the city, and their numbers are increasing by the minute. There's no way they could possibly handle all these goblins at once. So Lost tells everyone that the best course of action is to retreat for now. That doesn't mean they're retreating, though Lost intends to head to the guild to recruit more adventurers to help take down the goblins. At least, that was the idea. However, when they arrive at the guild, they find that nearly every adventurer in town is already preparing to head out and fight the goblins, and they seem unusually eager about it. The reason the adventurers are so motivated is because the guild put out a bounty on the goblins that escaped the labyrinth, and it's quite a generous amount. Part of the bounty is even paid in advance. So there are a bunch of adventurers who just end up taking the money and disappearing to buy some non-existent milk. Naru asks why they keep giving out advanced payments if they know people like that are going to take advantage of it. Amherst would personally like to stop wasting money, but it's an order from Handsome, so she has no choice but to go along with it. Marnell doesn't see this as a bad thing, reasoning that, regardless of their personal motivations, if all these adventurers join the fight against the goblins, the town will be saved. However, Zig raises a question, wondering if Handsome might have anticipated this outcome since the large sums of money being offered as rewards would have needed to be prepared weeks in advance. At that moment, Ralma arrives, and Lost is surprised to find that she's still in town. Taking the opportunity, he asks if she also expected something like this to happen. For such a massive number of goblins to escape the labyrinth all at once, there could be only one explanation: a labyrinth rampage. Naru doesn't know what a labyrinth rampage is, but Amherst recalls reading about it in an old book. She leads everyone into the back to take a look at it. A labyrinth rampage is a phenomenon where countless monsters emerge from the labyrinth at once, while it usually only lasts one day. There have been reports of rampages lasting up to a week. In a case like that, any nearby cities or villages would be overwhelmed by monsters and eventually become ruins. The rampage is caused when the ambient magic in the labyrinth exceeds a certain level. The only way to prevent it is to continuously slay all the monsters in there, while also allowing new monsters to spawn in the labyrinth to absorb some of that magic. As Amherst reflects, she remembers that the Adventurers Guild was originally established to ensure the magic levels in the labyrinth remain at a manageable level. This turns out to be vital information, leaving the others a bit annoyed that she hadn't brought it up sooner. In her defense, she explains that it was only mentioned once during guild staff orientation, and no one really pays attention to that. Ralma doesn't fault Amherst for overlooking it since the last labyrinth rampage occurred over a century ago. Still, when it comes to a catastrophe like a dungeon rampage, 100 years isn't all that long. It's recent enough that there are detailed reports about it, and anyone who's been in the adventuring profession for a while should be familiar with it. Marnell finds it strange that, even though Marmot is one of the largest adventurous cities out there, it wasn't able to slay enough monsters to keep the magic levels in check. It's almost as if this rampage was intentionally caused, but speculation won't get them anywhere right now since the rampage is already in progress. So, Ralma asks Lost what he wants to do about it. A short time later, Lost and a few others are busy helping the locals move their belongings out of the area. Naru questions whether all of this is truly necessary. Lost admits he's not thrilled about using other people's possessions either, but he explains that if the rampage drags on for several days, no matter how hard the adventurers fight, they won't be able to hold out indefinitely. The city is bound to sustain damage, so the best they can do is prepare by using these items to build a barricade and reduce the impact as much as possible. Marnell is yelling at Keith and the other kids for trying to go fight the goblins as well. Keith and the others think it's the right thing to do since this place is their hometown, and they want to fight to defend it. But in all honesty, Keith and the others would probably die the second they set foot on that battlefield. So Marnell won't let them go. He tells them that they can fight for their home in the future when they are more competent as adventurers. But getting themselves killed won't do anyone any good if they really want to help. Marnell suggests that they should play support roles for the adventurers engaged in combat. Things like transporting injured people or sending messages back and forth will help the fight go smoother in the long run. Keith and the others understand what he's saying, so they all agree to support the adventurers and run off to get started. Not long after, the goblins reach the city entrance, where the adventurers are already stationed, ready to intercept them. As the battle commences, they seal off the entrance using carts and begin attacking the goblins within. The fight quickly intensifies, with even mid-level monsters appearing. Lost hadn't anticipated the monsters arriving in just half a day, and he blames himself for not being better prepared. However, Ralma reassures him, reminding him that this is his first time facing a labyrinth rampage, just like everyone else. No one could expect him to be fully ready. Still, if he feels responsible, the best thing he can do is give it everything he's got to ensure everyone makes it through alive. Aside from the goblins, there are also 2 liches floating in the air, and these ones can talk as well. They start yelling, telling the adventurers that they will kill all the humans. But Ralma isn't interested in hearing their chant, so she starts shooting fireballs at the monsters. Marnell orders everyone to attack at once. Through their combined efforts, the group manages to eliminate every monster in the initial wave. However, just as Ralma thinks the battle is over, a second wave of monsters appears and launches another attack. Naru asks if Ralma can take them out with another fireball, but she's too exhausted to assist for the time being. Seeing this, Zig steps up and decides to handle the monsters himself. With Lyra focusing on healing, Lost decides to join Zig in the fight. Together, the two of them do their best to confront the goblins, holding their ground with determination. But then Zig accidentally trips on one of the goblins' clubs, leaving his defenses wide open. The goblin is about to use the opportunity to smash his head in, but at the last second, Zig's master, Ronaldo, dashes in to save him. This is our first time seeing Ronaldo, but he's the one who trained Zig and gifted him the magic sword he's always using. However, Zig isn't the only one who has a history with Ronaldo. Lost, Naru, and Ralma all know him as well. Ronaldo was the one who taught Lost how to use a sword, and for a while, he also acted as Naru's personal swordsmanship teacher, although she ended up deciding to go with martial arts instead. Ronaldo, an old friend of Ralma's, teases her by calling her a fire demon, which annoys her enough to fire off a blast at him. Ronaldo effortlessly deflects it, but while he has plenty he'd like to say to her, there are more pressing matters at hand. Without wasting any time, he dashes off to confront the goblins. While Ronaldo is handling the goblins, a magic door suddenly opens on the side of a building, and Handsome walks out, telling Ralma that Branch President Mist wants to see her. Ralma is a little suspicious about this whole thing, but she agrees to go see Mist. Before she leaves, though, Lost asks if he can come along since there's a lot he wants to say to Mist in person. Surprisingly, Handsome says it's fine for Lost to accompany them and even suggests that Naru should come as well. Handsome begins guiding them to Mist's chambers, leaving Naru puzzled as to why Mist would want to see her. Lost, however, reassures her that everything will be fine. He promises that, in the worst-case scenario, if Mist tries anything, he'll protect her. But Ralma quickly corrects him, cautioning that he wouldn't stand a chance against Mist in a fight. She explains that Mist is even stronger than she is and emphasizes that Lost should avoid attacking him at all costs. That being said, the moment Ralma lays eyes on Mist, she immediately hurls a massive fireball straight at his face. Naturally, Mist emerges entirely unscathed, though he reprimands Ralma for her recklessness, pointing out that she nearly scorched his prized clothing. This is Mist, the guild branch president and the last surviving elf in the world. Lost and Naru remain stunned after discovering that someone as formidable as Ralma has a master. Ralma explains that Mist surpasses her in every way imaginable. While elves are naturally skilled in magic, Mist stands out even among his kind, having lived for over 600 years and mastering an incredible array of spells. Meanwhile, Mist has been staring at Naru with an intensity that's beginning to make her uneasy. Sensing her discomfort, Ralma addresses Mist, asking why he summoned them. It has been years since she last saw him, and after learning he was in this town, he continually avoided her until now. She assumes this meeting isn't meant to be a simple reunion. Indeed, Mist has something important to tell them, but it's going to be a long story. He uses magic to conjure up some chairs so everyone can sit before they begin. Ralma asks Mist if this was his plan all along. He lured scumbag adventurers into the city and refused to do anything about their criminal conduct because he intended to have them fight the rampage. She points out that the reason Handsome kept telling people to leave town over the smallest complaint was an attempt to allow the kind adventurers to stay out of trouble. All of this points to the conclusion that Mist must have known about the rampage long before it occurred, and Mist doesn't deny it. He explains that the signs were evident to anyone paying attention. The unusual events in the labyrinth made it clear a rampage was imminent. Strong monsters had started appearing on the upper levels, and there was an unusually high evolution rate among them. However, if Mist truly foresaw the rampage, Naru questions why he didn't warn the people about it beforehand. Handsome cuts her off and says warning the people would have done nothing to help. They knew a rampage was coming, but they had no idea if it would come in a day, a week, or 10 years. Issuing a warning with no clear time frame would make no difference to their defenses. Even so, it wouldn't make sense to hide the possibility of such a devastating event occurring. So Ralma assumes there must be some hidden reason why Mist didn't tell anyone about the rampage. Ralma suspects that Mist might have caused the rampage, but Mist dismisses the idea, explaining that even if he could control the labyrinth, he wouldn't create such a massive headache for himself. He reveals that the decision to keep the rampage a secret came from his boss, the supervisor of every adventurer's guild in the country. Essentially, although rampages are known to last for several days and have the potential to destroy multiple cities, the higher-ups didn't consider it a significant threat since it wasn't occurring near the royal capital. They chose to keep it under wraps to prevent widespread panic and chaos across the country. But that means Marmot and the cities nearby are being sacrificed, which is why Mist took matters into his own hands and set up personal countermeasures against the rampage. Lost and Naru are asked if they remember all the towers that were constructed across town. Those are likely part of the last resort contingency plan that Mist made. However, before activating it, he wants to do everything he can to defend the city. He asks Ralma to step up and help hold off the monsters. No matter how determined the adventurers outside may be, they will eventually tire and need to rest. However, the countermeasure Mist designed requires an immense amount of mana to operate, which is why he needs Ralma to power it. Considering the situation, Ralma agrees to return and act as the energy source, but she challenges Mist, pointing out that if he's asking her to risk her life so easily, she wants to know if he's willing to do the same. Mist confirms this and says he's going to be doing everything within his power to stop the rampage, which is why he and Handsome will be going to the lowest floor of the labyrinth. Naru is surprised to hear this since she recalls that the bottom of the labyrinth hasn't been found yet. While that may be true, thanks to a bunch of reports, Mist has been able to pinpoint the final boss's general location. Lost believes that a mission like this is far too dangerous. But if Mist and Handsome can succeed in defeating the Labyrinth Master, the mana fueling the rampage will be severed, bringing it to an end much faster. After learning about their plan, Ralma resolves to do her best to hold off the rampage long enough for them to take down the Labyrinth Master. Outside, the situation with the rampage hasn't gotten much better, but thanks to the efforts of Ronaldo and, to a lesser extent, Zig, they have managed to keep the monsters from breaking into the city. However, a lot of orcs start showing up, and Zig is worried about them breaking through the blockade, so he goes up front and asks Ronaldo to charge at the orcs with him. As the two continue their battle, Ralma and the others are led to the guild courtyard and instructed to follow through with the plan. Ralma locates the device Mist had mentioned and places her hand on it, activating it to open a door leading inside. She then gives Lost a warning because even if they are working with Mist for now, he isn't someone who could be trusted, so Lost needs to be careful about him while she's gone. Ralma then says goodbye before walking into the device and closing the door behind her. The device then powers on, and a blinding light begins pouring out of it as a massive barrier is formed all around the city. The adventurers near the gate are clueless about what's happening with the barrier, but they quickly take advantage of it, retreating inside for safety. Fortunately, it appears that the orcs won't be able to break through the barrier anytime soon, so the adventurers decide to focus on dealing with the monsters that managed to slip in before the barrier was activated. Meanwhile, Zig and Ronaldo have just finished dealing with the last orc, so Ronaldo tells Zig to take a break. Zig says he can still keep fighting, but Ronaldo can tell that he's out of breath, and if he's tired, he won't be able to fight effectively. Plus, there are plenty of other people, so they should be able to handle the remaining monsters on their own. That's only because this mysterious wall is keeping the monsters out. At that moment, Lost and Naru arrive and share the details of what happened, explaining how Ralma is putting her life on the line to maintain the barrier. The barrier is sustained by Ralma's magic, but to cover such a vast area, it's consuming an enormous amount of mana. While Ralma may have a substantial mana pool, it is still finite, meaning she will eventually run out if this continues. Normally, if a person runs out of mana, they simply end up passing out from mana exhaustion. But the device Ralma is in forcibly sucks mana out of her body, so as long as a magic barrier is still needed, Even if she passes out, the device will continue draining magic from her body until she ends up dead. Another monster appears, this time a griffin, which is incredibly powerful even under normal circumstances. Even with the combined efforts of all the adventurers present, they wouldn't stand a chance against just one griffin. Fortunately, they don't have to face it directly, as the barrier keeps it from entering the city. However, its mere presence still poses a significant problem. The barrier is made from elf technology, so it won't be breached by the attacks from the griffin. But the more damage the barrier takes, the more mana it will need to drain from Ralma to repair itself. If they let it continue attacking the barrier like that, then it won't be long before Ralma dies from mana depletion. Lost refuses to let the situation escalate further and prepares to leave to confront the griffin. However, before he can go, Ronaldo stops him, reminding him that he doesn't have to face it alone. They're all a team, and Ralma is important to each of them, so they'll do whatever it takes to ensure her survival. The group runs out of the barrier and towards the horde of goblins and orcs. But the main threat right now is the griffin that's repeatedly striking the barrier. So Ronaldo tells everyone to deal with the orcs quickly so they can focus their attention on the griffin. The group starts laying waste to the small fry monsters on the ground, and all of a sudden, the remaining goblins start backing off because they've realized they have no chance of winning. They decide to call in a Fenrir for backup. Naru, who has never seen a Fenrir before, can immediately sense its immense power, and Lost confirms her suspicion. The Fenrir has a lightning-fast dash and, while on the ground, boasts strength comparable to that of a griffin, making it a formidable opponent that won't be easy to overcome. Ronaldo asks Lost if he will be able to handle the Fenrir on his own since he still has to take down the griffin, and Lost thinks he should be able to manage it. So Ronaldo runs off to handle the griffin while the rest of them take on the Fenrir. Armia makes the first move, launching a fireball at the Fenrir. However, she wasn't prepared for its incredible speed and is caught off guard as the Fenrir charges straight at her. Fortunately, Lost reacts quickly enough to keep up with its movements, leaping in front of Armia and skillfully parrying the Fenrir's attacks. Everyone is amazed that Lost is capable of keeping up with the Fenrir's speed on his own. But even so, Lost is still losing. The only thing Lost has been able to do so far is defend himself. Eventually, the Fenrir catches Lost lacking and slashes his arm. Lost is too injured to continue fighting, so Zig steps in to distract the Fenrir alongside Armia, giving Lyra and Naru time to tend to Lost's wounds. Despite Lost insisting to Naru that he's fine, it's obvious he's not. Lyra points out that his arm is barely hanging on by a thread. She assures him that she can heal him, but it's going to take some time, so he needs to stay still and let her work. Meanwhile, as the griffin was flying in to once again attack the barrier, it finds Ronaldo perched atop the tower. Before the griffin even reaches the barrier, Ronaldo jumps off and slams it into the ground. The griffin is still alive, but Ronaldo injured its wing pretty badly, so it won't be able to fly for a while, and that makes it a lot easier for Ronaldo to take it down. Meanwhile, Zig and Armia are holding their own against the Fenrir, managing to keep it occupied. However, the Fenrir is clever enough to recognize that Armia is the weaker target compared to Zig. It lets out a howl, summoning a lick to deal with her. Armia is unable to react quickly enough and gets knocked out. Seeing Armia injured distracts Zig, leaving him vulnerable, and the Fenrir takes the opportunity to knock him down immediately. However, the Fenrir's real target is Lost, so it doesn't finish Zig off, and instead runs to stop Lyra from healing Lost before grabbing him and tossing Lost's unconscious body around. Naru is enraged that the Fenrir would dare to hurt her dear Lost, so she charges at the Fenrir and yells that she's going to make it pay for what it has done. All things considered, Naru is holding her own remarkably well against the Fenrir, even managing to knock it back with a powerful kick at one point. However, the Fenrir quickly recovers and launches a relentless assault, attacking her with full force. Eventually, it lands a devastating slash to her arm, causing Naru to collapse to the ground, standing triumphantly over her fallen body. The Fenrir believes it has claimed victory. That's when she reveals that she was just acting as bait this entire time, and in the next moment, Lost jumps up from behind the Fenrir and stabs it in the neck with his dagger. When Naru saw Lost on the floor earlier, she noticed that he was only pretending to be unconscious and was really healing his arm. So, she decided to draw the Fenrir's attention so it would lose focus on Lost and become susceptible to a surprise attack. With the Fenrir defeated, Naru succumbs to her injuries and passes out. By the time she regains consciousness, the others have already brought her back inside the barrier. She's surprised to find that her body no longer hurts. Though with Lost around, it would actually be more surprising if he hadn't already healed her. Naru knows that the Fenrir was taken care of, but she asks what happened to the griffin. Ronaldo pulls out the griffin's magic gem and says he killed it. Now that the major threats have been taken care of, Ralma should be able to survive a little while longer. But if they want to ensure that she lives past this, they have to hope that Mist really does take down the Labyrinth Master and Handsome actually takes out the Labyrinth Master like they said they would. However, there's nothing they can do about it at the moment. So Lost suggests they all return to the inn and rest. But suddenly, Handsome appears behind Naru, clearly displeased that she's still alive. It turns out he had planned for her to die in battle today. Without warning, he pulls her into a portal, intending to finish the job himself. Marnell and his fellow adventurers had just wrapped up dealing with the remaining monsters in the town. With the barrier still standing strong, it seemed everyone would be safe for now. Keith and some of the other kids approached, bringing food for the adventurers and suggesting they take a break now that the town was secure. Although Marnell appreciated the gesture, he couldn't relax just yet. His concern for Lost and the others weighed heavily on his mind. Sheila then reassured him, mentioning that Lost had already returned to the inn and was resting. Relieved to hear that, Marnell asked if that meant everyone had made it back safely. Sadly, while Lost and the others had returned, Naru hadn't been so fortunate. Back at the inn, the group is trying to plan out their next move and figure out why Handsome kidnapped Naru. Ronaldo believes it's because Naru is the sleeping princess. Armia finds it hard to believe since she thought the story of the sleeping princess was just a fairy tale, but some of the details may have been exaggerated. The story is based on real events. The story says that the sleeping princess has the power to put the evil dragon to sleep by sacrificing herself. So Naru was likely kidnapped so she could be fed to the dragon. Meanwhile, Handsome brings Naru back to Mist's run, where Mist praises Handsome for doing an excellent job. However, as soon as Naru realizes that Mist is the mastermind behind her kidnapping, she lunges at him in an attempt to attack. Sadly, Mist, having lived long enough to become a Jedi, uses his power to halt Naru in mid-air and force her down to her knees. When Naru demands to know what he plans to do with her, Mist avoids giving her a clear answer and instead asks if she's familiar with the tale of the evil dragon. Naru thinks Mist is mocking her since everyone in this world has heard about the evil dragon. But Mist is serious, so he releases her and asks her to explain what she knows. Naru talks about how the evil dragon is a terrifying creature that appeared 200 years ago, but a hero suddenly appeared and defeated it. Mist tells her she's mostly correct, but she's missing a few important details. First of all, the hero wasn't actually able to kill the dragon. All he managed to do was send it to where it came from. And the dragon didn't only show up 200 years ago, it also showed up 400, 600, and 800 years ago as well. The dragon's cycle of appearances repeats every 200 years, and each time it has been defeated by a hero, forcing it to retreat until it regains its strength and attacks again. Now, exactly 200 years have passed since the dragon was last defeated, meaning its reappearance is imminent. Realizing how dire this is, Naru asks if the hero will be able to stop the dragon again this time. Unfortunately, Mist informs her that this won't happen. Typically, the hero emerges alongside the dragon's revival, but so far, there's been no sign of a hero appearing. However, even if there's no hero right now, there is still someone who can put the dragon to sleep, and that person is Naru. The fact that her hair is blue is all the proof they need to figure out that she is the sleeping princess, since when a maiden is chosen, their hair will suddenly turn blue. Naru asks if her father knew about this, as it would be hard to imagine someone in a position of power like him being oblivious to something so important. This is probably why he let Naru become an adventurer in the first place. Back at the inn, Lost asks Ronaldo whether Mist plans to use Naru to put the dragon to sleep. However, Ronaldo doubts that Mist is the one calling the shots. The decision likely came from his superior, a chancellor of the Adventurers Guild. According to Ronaldo, that man's only concern is reducing the damage caused by the dragon, no matter the cost. While Armia comments that this doesn't sound so terrible, Ronaldo emphasizes that the chancellor's focus is solely on minimizing the dragon's destruction, not stopping it altogether. For example, if he had to sacrifice 40 people so that 60 others would survive, he wouldn't hesitate. In fact, the reason this city has no walls is because the Chancellor didn't approve of having a wall built. When the dragon's return approaches, labyrinth stampedes are bound to occur, and the Chancellor was well aware of this, so he planned to let Marmot be destroyed by the stampede to send a message. If a city were completely destroyed, then everyone from the commoners to the king would realize the gravity of the situation, and the Chancellor would be given full authority to do whatever it takes to defeat the dragon. Naru is shocked that the Chancellor would be willing to sacrifice all the people of Marmot. However, the Chancellor sees this as the only way to save the world. Each time the dragon emerges, it chooses a different labyrinth as its location. By studying the ambient mana and monitoring labyrinth activity, the guild was able to determine that the dragon would appear here, and they've known this for decades. Ronaldo tells the others the same thing, but if they've known that the dragon would show up here for so long, then Zig doesn't understand why they didn't warn the townspeople of the imminent danger. It's clear that the Chancellor intended to let all the people in the town die, but Mist wasn't on board with that idea. So he took desperate measures to construct a barrier around Marmot without the Chancellor finding out. However, if the stampede doesn't come to an end soon, Ralma's life could be in serious danger. Because of this, Mist is probably determined to defeat the labyrinth boss as quickly as he can. At the same time, he had Handsome abduct Naru as a backup plan to stop the dragon in case his mission fails. Of course, Ronaldo admits he can't be certain about Mist's true intentions without confronting him directly, but that would be difficult since they have no idea where he is. However, they do know that he is planning to defeat the labyrinth boss. So that must mean he is headed for the deepest part of the labyrinth, so they might be able to find him there. The labyrinth still hasn't been fully explored, so this is going to be a dangerous mission in unknown territory, and Ronaldo wants to make sure everybody is in agreement before they begin. Lost would naturally do whatever it takes to save Naru, and the others care about her a lot as well, so they all agree to go save her. In Mist's office, he, Handsome, and Naru step onto the magic circle at the center of the room and are teleported to a vast open space within the labyrinth. Meanwhile, Lost and the others have also entered the labyrinth and are surprised to find no monsters in the vicinity. This, however, is because the stampede has pushed most of the monsters out of the labyrinth, but with new monsters expected to start spawning soon, they realize they need to move quickly. Over on Naru's end, as they walk through the labyrinth floor, they run into a giant cyclops. Monsters like that are extremely high level, so Naru is wondering what kind of place this is that has monsters like that wandering around. Mist explains that this is the deepest floor of the labyrinth, and over there is the temple where the dungeon boss resides. Naru is surprised to hear this since she thought this place hadn't been found yet, but that's just because Mist kept it a secret intentionally. Apart from Naru, the only ones who have ever been in this area are Mist and Handsome, and apparently Lost as well, since he managed to track Naru down. The moment he spots her, he shouts her name, but his voice draws the attention of the Cyclopes nearby. The Cyclopes block Lost's path and attempt to attack him. Despite their immense strength, Lost easily outmaneuvers them, severing one Cyclops' arm before proceeding to take down the rest. Throughout the fight, his eyes glow a menacing red. However, once the final Cyclops falls, Lost's eyes return to normal, and he turns to reassure his friends that he's okay. Lost then confronts Mist, but Mist seems oddly happy and tells Lost he is glad he made it here in time. He then hands Naru back over to him without a fight, so Lost asks him if he's trying to trick him or something. Mist tells Lost that he isn't in favor of the Chancellor's methods, so he wants to minimize casualties as much as possible. Ronaldo and Zig don't believe him because he still orchestrated plans that involve sacrificing Ralma, Naru, and even the morally gray adventurers, but Mist reminds them that no one has died yet, and if they can manage to defeat the labyrinth boss in time, no one will have to die. However, for this plan to succeed, Lost will need to be the one to defeat the boss. Mist, of course, plans to assist as much as he can. However, since the gods do not favor the elves, this world belongs to the humans, and it is only fitting that its salvation comes from human hands. Though Mist is incredibly powerful, he doesn't have much time left. He makes it clear that they can't depend on him to secure the victory for them. With no other option, everyone agrees to take on the boss together. As they walk towards the temple, Lyra asks Zig if it's really all right for them to trust the words of a man like Mist. Even Lost doesn't entirely trust Mist. But if what he says is true, then they should be able to save everyone by defeating the boss. Once they finally arrive in the boss temple, Mist turns to face the group and gives them a little more information about the dragon and the labyrinth stampede. When the hero defeats the dragon, it is forced to go to sleep in a separate realm, and it takes a tremendous amount of magic to awaken the beast. That magic power is accumulated by the monsters rampaging through the labyrinth, and it is the duty of the labyrinth boss to deliver that power to the dragon, allowing it to awaken. In other words, defeating the labyrinth boss would not only stop the stampede, but also halt the dragon's revival. However, this doesn't entirely solve the core issue. Even if they sever the dragon's mana supply here, it will simply attempt to gather magic through another labyrinth. Still, defeating the boss here would at least buy them a significant amount of time to plan their next move before the dragon makes another attempt to awaken. Mist walks up to the temple gate and slams his staff into the ground to get the attention of the labyrinth boss, the siren. Once it comes out, Mist tells everyone to attack it with everything they have, so they all charge at it. Armia uses a spell to bind the siren in place, while Zig and Ronaldo both leap into the air and use their swords to cut off the siren's wings. So far, they are doing pretty well against it, but the siren suddenly launches a barrage of glass at the group in an attempt to stop them. However, Noru leaps into the air and delivers a powerful punch that fractures the siren's face, forcing it to attempt an escape. Before it can flee, Lost intercepts it, slicing it cleanly in half and officially defeating the labyrinth boss. This should have been a moment of triumph, but suddenly, a dark tendril pierces through Handsome's back, and the ominous voice of the evil dragon echoes through the portal. It looks like the dragon had already acquired enough mana to allow it to partially manifest through that portal. The dragon seems to recognize Mist since it has seen him several times before. It is infuriated that Mist is once again interfering with its plans, but this time, it won't allow anything to stop it. So it demands that Mist surrender his body to it if he doesn't want to see Handsome die. Mist knows that giving up his body to the dragon would mean certain doom for the world. So, as much as he hates the idea of it, he's going to have to let Handsome die and then use all his power to seal the portal. However, Mist hesitates for a brief moment, unwilling to let Handsome die. That split-second hesitation is all the dragon needs to forcibly seize control of his body. Using Mist as a vessel, the dragon channels its power to sustain the portal and transfer its energy. However, the labyrinth lacks sufficient mana, so the dragon teleports away in search of a more suitable power source. With the dragon's departure, Handsome is released and collapses to the floor. Lost quickly rushes to his side, attempting to heal the massive wound in his chest. However, Handsome urges Lost to leave him and go after the dragon, warning that there's no telling what kind of destruction it might cause. Meanwhile, the dragon has teleported to the outskirts of the city and is now attempting to break through the barrier. It unleashes powerful magic, and it's clear that Ralma won't be able to hold out against the onslaught much longer. Ralma can feel the presence of the evil dragon within Mist, but she has no idea how this came to be or what exactly is happening. Unfortunately, she's in no position to take any action herself, leaving her to depend on Lost to rescue her for the time being. Although Ralma's shield remains intact for now, the looming threat of the evil dragon has the people overcome with fear, which the dragon is steadily absorbing to power his next strike. As the energy reaches its peak, the ground begins to tremble, signaling that the second wave of the stampede is about to breach the barrier. Marnell watches as monsters begin to pile up outside the barrier, and it's looking really bad, but he tries to assure the kids that everything is going to be fine since the barrier is still standing. As long as it is there, none of the monsters will be able to get in. But even if that's the case, the barrier can't last forever, especially not with all those monsters attacking it. so it's only a matter of time before it collapses. Outside, Ronaldo is deeply concerned about Ralma, as the relentless attacks from the monsters against the barrier are endangering her life. That said, things aren't exactly going smoothly on their side either. Lost has been attempting to heal Handsome for quite some time now, but the wound in Handsome's chest was caused by a mass of condensed dark mana, which is making Lost's healing magic less effective. As Lost continues his efforts, Handsome regains consciousness and urges him to leave and focus on saving Mist instead. Handsome cares deeply for Mist because he wasn't just his master, he was his benefactor. Lost knows better than anyone how labyrinth orphans like them were treated like disposable pawns by everyone. But Mist was different. He taught Handsome everything he knows, even though he was a talentless nobody. Mist's generosity was, in part, because he needed a human to run the guild in his place to hide the fact that he was an elf. But even so, Handsome feels greatly indebted to him for all he has done over the years. Mist seems to have genuinely come to care for Handsome as well, which explains why he hesitated when Handsome's life was at risk. Knowing that someone in this world valued his life brings Handsome a sense of happiness, but he can't help wishing that Mist had let him die back then. To Handsome, it would have given purpose to his otherwise meaningless life and spared everyone from the current chaos. However, Lost disagrees, telling Handsome that he's wrong about his life being worthless. After all the time they've spent together, Lost has grown to care about Handsome, and even considers him a friend. Handsome admits that he also thinks of Lost as a friend, which was why he kept trying to get him to leave the city so he wouldn't end up getting involved in this catastrophe. But that didn't work out as he had hoped. Just then, Naru yells at Handsome because, even if he was forced to keep the stampede a secret by the Prime Minister, with the way he acted towards Lost, he doesn't deserve to call himself a friend. Lost tries to calm Naru down, but Handsome says she's right, he has no right to call himself a friend. So, he asks Lost to stop healing him because he deserves to die after what he has done. Naru, however, shouts that Handsome must take responsibility for his actions and can't allow himself to die until he's made amends for what he did in the town. Meanwhile, Marnell has gathered all the adventurers available to join the fight against the monsters. Lost and the others are taken aback when they see the adventurers leaving the safety of the barrier to engage in battle, but it's clear they're trying to ease Ralma's burden. With their efforts, she might be able to hold out a little longer. So far, everything has gone according to Mist's plan aside from the fact that he got his body snatched. They need to figure out a way to get the dragon out of Mist's body before they get started. Ronaldo asks if anyone wants to leave since there's still time to run away if they want to, but they all know it would be pointless to run. If the dragon revives itself, then the whole world will be destroyed, and there's nowhere to run from that. They all agree to work together to take down the dragon, but before they get started, Lost tells Naru to stay behind. The fight with the dragon begins as they launch a fireball to draw its attention. This irritates the dragon, which turns to face them, clearly annoyed by their audacity to attack. Meanwhile, Naru remains on the hill where Lost instructed her to stay back. The reason he didn't want her joining the battle is that she's the sleeping princess. If the dragon were to recognize her, it could place her in serious danger. The group begins fighting the dragon. Although the dragon isn't taking any of this seriously since there's no way for them to come after him in the air, the group may not have flight magic, but they do have an explosion spell. So, Lost gets onto the rock, an army of fire spells launching him high into the sky. The dragon is impressed by how reckless Lost is willing to be just to take it out, but even this human bullet move won't be enough to stop him. The dragon stabs Lost through the chest before he can strike it, and then drops Lost to the ground, where he starts to bleed out. Unable to watch any longer, Naru chooses to step in despite Lost's warning. The others rush to Lost's side to check on him, but upon arriving, they realize the situation is far more dire than they initially thought. Lyra immediately begins using her healing magic in an attempt to save his life. However, while they're focused on helping Lost, the dragon resumes its efforts to breach the barrier. At this pace, Ralma won't be able to hold out much longer. Ronaldo thinks they should evacuate the people in the city before the barrier is broken so they don't end up dying. But even if they do that, Naru realizes that there will be nowhere for them to run to since the entire world will be destroyed once the dragon revives itself. There's only one option left at this point. so Naru decides that she's going to use her sleeping princess powers to stop the dragon. Ronaldo asks her if she's sure about this because using that power will mean that she has to sacrifice herself. On top of that, the sleeping princess power isn't a perfect fix for the dragon's rampage. It may be able to put it to sleep, but that slumber will only last 10 years at most. He once again asks her if she's willing to sacrifice her life just to put the dragon to sleep for 10 years. Naru acknowledges that 10 years isn't a long time, but it would be enough to devise a plan to defeat the dragon. Without the hero present, she believes her friends can find a solution before those 10 years are up. Standing tall before the dragon, Naru boldly announces herself and commands it to come and devour her. The dragon recognizes who Naru is and, despite wanting to resist the overwhelming urge to consume her, it finds itself completely overcome by desire. Slowly, it begins to approach, poised to kill her. Lost regains consciousness just as the dragon is about to kill her, and every atom in his body refuses to let that happen. He unleashes the unknown power from before. Zig and the others realize what's happened to Lost, so Seed tells everyone to retreat immediately since they don't want to get caught in the crossfire of what's about to happen. The dragon has no idea what's going on since no human should be capable of producing this much power. But before it can make any guesses, Lost charges at it and begins punching the daylights out of the dragon. While it's a relief that Lost is defeating the dragon for them, the way he's fighting raises a troubling possibility he might end up trapped in this form permanently. If that happens, the original Lost could be lost forever. After pummeling the dragon repeatedly, Lost grabs it by the shirt and prepares to deliver the final blow. But before he can, Naru steps in front of him, determined to stop him because she doesn't want him to lose himself. Seeing Naru safe and unharmed, Lost manages to break free from his rage-fueled power and expresses his gratitude to her for being there for him. Meanwhile, the badly injured dragon tries to take the opportunity to sneak away. However, in his weakened state, Mist is able to regain partial control over his body. He refuses to let the dragon get away and holds it in place so Lost can finally take it out. Handsome calls for Lost to finish it, but Lost is hesitant to kill a good person like Mist. Mist assures him that he is fine with this outcome because he has lived for so long that death doesn't scare him anymore. Lost raises his sword and agrees to finish Mist off to get rid of the dragon. But Naru knows that doing something like this is going to be very difficult for Lost, so she offers to support him and shoulder half the burden. Lost is grateful for the support, and together they lift the dagger and cautiously move toward the dragon as Mist struggles to keep it restrained. With precision, they drive the dagger deep into Mist's chest, forcing the evil dragon to be expelled from his body. However, the wound left behind is undeniably fatal. Naru expresses her gratitude to everyone for their efforts, noting that they've successfully severed the mana flow to the portal, ensuring the dragon can no longer invade their world. Moreover, the mana enveloping the city will gradually dissipate, bringing the stampede to an end. It's all thanks to Lost and Naru's bravery. Once the stampede finally ends, Ronaldo goes to turn the barrier off and release Ralma from the pod. She finally steps out and is relieved that the pod didn't suck her dry before the stampede ended. A little while later, the king receives a report on the incident that occurred, and he is glad to find out that the evil dragon has been temporarily defeated, and the city of Marmot is still standing. However, even if it worked out this time, he isn't convinced that Lost can be an adequate substitute for the hero. Back at the guild in Marmot, Handsome approaches Amherst with a proposal. He wants her to become the new guild branch president since Mist is no longer alive. Normally, the position would fall to Handsome himself, but he has other plans he wants to pursue, so he hopes Amherst will take on the role in his stead. Amherst initially refuses, arguing that she's not a good leader and wouldn't be able to run the guild properly. However, Handsome points out that he isn't much better suited for the job, making Amherst the best candidate in his eyes. To persuade her, he leans in and mentions the generous salary the position comes with. And suddenly, Amherst is perfectly willing to accept the role of branch president. Later that night, a huge party is held to celebrate the successful defense of the city. At one of the tables, Ronaldo talks with Lyra and Zig about Lost. He tells them that he already knew about the mysterious power Lost possesses, and it's too much for Zig to manage. so he suggests that it be handled by the Royal Capital Guild instead. Meanwhile, Lost is on the terrace with Naru and tells her that even if they've managed to stop the dragon temporarily, it will still return one day. This is why he has decided to go on a journey to find the hero, so they'll be ready next time, and he wants Naru to join him on his journey. Naru eagerly agrees, as all she truly wants is to spend time with Lost as a member of his party. The following morning, Lost and Naru set off on their journey, walking together into the horizon. From a distance, Zig and the others watch them go. Armia questions whether it's really okay to let Lost leave like this, given that they were supposed to be keeping an eye on him. However, both Lyra and Zig feel it's not their place to interfere, especially since Lost and Naru have already made their choice. Besides, as long as they remain adventurers, their paths are bound to cross again in some labyrinth. Watch this next video on screen and subscribe to not miss next part.